or so. If you would all please stand for the invocation. Commissioner Lewis is going to lead us in the invocation this evening.
Okay, let's see. Spirit of life, we ask that you look upon us and guide us as we make decisions tonight. That spark which is in each of us, the good and the bright, let that guide us as we make good choices for the future of our city and for all of its inhabitants. Thank you. Blessed be and amen.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and see a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Okay. All right, Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Snover?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Price?
Here.
Commissioner Sykes?
Here.
Commissioner Lewis?
Here.
Commissioner Rand is absent.
Okay. All right. Thanks again for coming, folks. Our next item is under proclamation, item 6 on the agenda. We have National Manufacturing Day. And I'm going to read this proclamation real quick. Is there somebody that's here to accept the proclamation? Anybody? No? Okay. So proclamation of the City of Aztec, whereas the United States National Institute of Science and Technology has announced observance of October 5th as National Manufacturing Day 2018, and whereas manufacturing has a powerful and positive impact on New Mexico's economy, and whereas New Mexico manufacturers employ more than 26,000 New Mexicans, and whereas the manufacturing sector in New Mexico exported over $3.5 billion in goods and services in 2016, and whereas the average salary in the manufacturing sector in New Mexico in 2016 exceeded $58,000 annually, and whereas in 2016, goods manufactured in New Mexico accounted for 96.6% of all exports from this state, and whereas exports of New Mexico's manufactured goods increased more than 150% from 2010 to 2015, and whereas manufacturers throughout the state invite guests to tour their facilities during National Manufacturing Month to see what is truly New Mexico made. Now in witness whereof, I, Victor Snover, Mayor of the City of Aztec, New Mexico, do proclaim the month of October 2018 as National Manufacturing Month throughout the state of New Mexico. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is agenda approval. If there are any items on tonight's agenda that do not meet the requirements of all commissioners, now is the time to take off one of those items or amend the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I move to approve tonight's agenda.
I second it.
Yeah, that's.
Is that where you want it?
Yeah, that's where we had to amend it.
Oh, I thought we were going to do it after. Okay. Sorry. So I'll hold off on my motion.
Okay. So let's back up a little bit. So under the agenda approval, there is an item that needs to be amended. Item D under land use hearings. It's just for those that are following along, there was just a typo. It says 15-05 instead of 18-05. So we need a motion that amends land use item D from 15-05 to 18-05.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to approve tonight's agenda with the amendment of, on item D, the Hill Core drill site permit, to amend that to, from from 15-05 to 18-05.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next on the agenda is citizen recognition. I have none, and our city manager is out, I believe, hunting elk this week. So is there anybody else that has any citizen recognition they'd like to bring up? Hearing none, we are going to move right into employee recognition. Anybody have any employee recognition? I do have, well, at least one, I guess. I want to say thank you. One, I want to say thank you to all of our city staff, of course. Thank you to Kathy for stepping in as kind of like acting city manager while Steve's out hunting. And I want to recognize our new Parks Department head, Jeff Blackburn. I got to spend a few hours with him on Saturday on National Public Lands Day. We went out to one of the arches in close proximity to Alien Trail. And once we finally found the place, I didn't feel as bad. I felt like I was, I'm like, holy cow, but we're all having trouble finding it. So once we found it, we had a great morning. I think Marita and Laura just walked in. They were also there helping us.
No trouble.
Yeah, they had no trouble finding it. Jeff's wife Myra was there, and Kelly Townsend was also there. But specifically to Jeff, thank you for kind of spearheading this. He brought all the gear that we needed. He hauled it all off so we didn't have to do it afterward. And then he did the report to the BLM. So thank you very much, Mr. Blackburn. I had a great time. Next is item 10, consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda will be voted on with one motion. If any item proposed does not meet the approval of all commissioners, a commissioner may request that the item be heard under items from consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we approve consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we are going deceptively fast.
Oh, it'll slow down.
All right. Those of you that were here 2 weeks ago know exactly what I'm talking about. Next is citizens' input. Item 12, 3 minutes maximum. Citizens who wish to speak will sign up prior to the meeting. This is for items not otherwise listed on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody that signed up for citizens' input? All right. Seeing none, we will move into business items. Item 13 on the agenda. Item A is the FY funding application for Aztec Museum.
Mayor, Commission, this is the funding application that the Aztec Museum submitted with the annual budget process. In July, this was presented, and at that time, the Commission postponed any action on it pending some discussions that were occurring. The Aztec Museum has requested that we put this back before Commission for action on their request. There are members from the museum that are available to respond to any questions you might have, as well as then Ed Kotik was involved in the discussions and has a better knowledge of the operations of the visitor center if you have questions.
Well, yeah, I'm a little, I don't know if I have questions. I guess I was reading through the staff notes that were provided, and I don't want to say that, I'm not prepared to say we should pull it or table it or anything like that, but I do want some clarification because, one, I was a little, I'm like, I wasn't really, I guess, kind of up to speed on some of the discussions that had been going on, and I didn't know whether it was one of those things that was just kind of cruising along and it was just a matter of time to get all the pieces put together. And after reading that, I realized that there's a little bit of, the waters are a little muddy on how we want to proceed, if we want to proceed at all. And there were issues with space constraints and room and personnel, and there just seems to be quite a few moving parts that I'm a little unsure about.
You got it.
And I think we have one of the board members that is hopefully able to clear some of that up.
Speak to that.
Yes, sir. Of course.
It's strange. I'm Jack Scott, newly appointed or elected or whatever president of the Museum Association. Can you hear okay? Is this on?
I can hear you. I don't know if
It's
that's
not very
on or-
clear. Yeah.
And it's strange, we walk in tonight and we expect to see Dale sitting here, and he's not. But anyway, I am the one elected to be president. I kind of will run through. Thank you for your consideration of our request for funding for the coming year. In reading over the agenda packet, I would like to clarify a few apparent misinterpretations or misunderstanding, at least on our part. This request has little to do with the previous discussions of the Visitor Center and Museum moving into a cooperative venture. Sadly, space consideration and operational concerns were a large part of the museum's backing away from the city's proposal. We have always given directions to the Visitor Center and offered support for the center's activities and function. I don't think it was ever implied that the center's sole purpose was to welcome visitors and hand out brochures. If we had a brochure rack and information at the museum, it would, we feel, open opportunity for discussion and direction for visitors to lead them to the center for more in-depth expertise the center offers. We feel we need to have better communication regarding the concern of city staff and ask your help with this. We do not want to be in a position of being a threat to staff. Through the agenda packet, it appears staff question and understand that our request is to fund a staff person when they feel the city is short-staffed and in the midst of physical constraints. This is not the case. We are trying to stay open in the winter at least a few days a week instead of closing as we have been forced to do in the past. This money is more for operational funding than staff funding, the money we're requesting. We at our last meeting approved half-time staff funding to stay open by dipping into our reserve fund. We want to try to keep people in Aztec and especially get them to stay with hopes of visitors going to our existing, and we're really excited about this, new eating establishments on Main Avenue. Anything we can do to attract people to spend money helps everyone. We hope to ask the restaurants and cafes to actively ask people's interests and to point out that we have a museum that these people might enjoy. We do appreciate that the city allows us to use city-owned buildings and property. In fact, this 50-some-year-old relationship has been beneficial to both the city and the museum. We especially appreciate the city staff dedication to keeping the grounds green and groomed. The museum over the years has expended major money in building buildings and adding value to the property to make it a draw to people passing through Aztec. For close to 50 years, we at the museum have tried to be accountable for the limited funds available to us with which to operate on an annual basis. We are a nonprofit and the federal government places restraints on us. We have had donations with strings attached that create fiduciary restraints on not spending certain money and only using the revenue it generates from interest and investment. We are disappointed to see the statement from city staff that perhaps it is time for the museum to become self-sufficient. Like with the city, we are experiencing revenue shortfalls the last few years. The money we have received from the city has not balanced our budget, but it has helped us to keep afloat and operating. We feel we offer a service and a presence that is beneficial to the city, and in talking with citizens, we find they feel the city money going to us is money well spent. We ask that you consider our request and grant us whatever you feel you are able to give. We are open to questions, any concerns that you have. Several of our board members are here, and we'd be glad to.
Mayor Snover.
Yes, ma'am.
What other sources of funds are available to the museum? Are there not any grants or any federal, state monies that assist
Not that
museums?
we have, we do receive every once for special projects like, and I'm probably not the one to be talking or answering to this. Henry Jackson and other people have given us photos. And we have gone in and through this a state funding source have digitalized and indexed those photos. But the funding is generally limited strictly to projects and not for operation of the museum. We operate under the funds we have. Many of them are dedicated and we can't touch them. We operate only by the revenue that they generate. We do have no donations. We charge a fee to get into the museum. Historically, when Aztec had a lot of older people that had oil and gas rights, they would donate large sums of money to keep us running, and it was not dedicated. It was just to go into the projects and stuff. And our investments, up until recently, were doing quite well, but we had quite a bit of investments in oil and gas fields because Tom Dugan was one of our board members. And we were kind of following his guidelines. And of course, we all know what happened to oil and gas. And that's slowly coming back some, but not enough to meet our total operating needs.
Any fundraisers that you have?
Annually, we go through the city billing and send out fundraising letters there, membership drive, things like this. We're hoping to find something that we can do a combined event and fundraiser type thing where we have several things that have been thrown out and discussed, but we haven't really formulated those to a workable event that will follow through. Lots of discussion. Are we going to end up with more money putting it into the event than we get back? Typical nonprofit organization problem. Is that helpful? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just, I give that annual report each year saying how we're going to run out of money after a certain amount of time. My name is Brian Haggerty, and I'm one of the board members. And in the most recent annual report we did a projection with the funds that we have to operate from. And when I run that, it shows that we kind of run out of money after about 13 years. And what Jack is referencing is some of the monies we were given, we were given a principal amount, and then the arrangement we had with Henry Jackson agreement was that we would not spend the principal, but we would use the interest. Mm-hmm. And it's, sometimes that's common with nonprofits. So it is a little bit misleading when I said we would run out of money in 13 years. It actually, and we have ways of doing things. This is not a life or death thing for the museum tonight. We all know that. We would like to have some funding to help us do a better job and try to coordinate a little bit more with certain services of the city. But we do have some problems, and I think we've only received funding just the last couple of years. I don't know how many we received in the last 50 years, but since I've been on the board, we received funding 10,000 the last 2 years. And we understand how everything is tight. And I've gone off track a bit. But the point I'm trying to say is we have some concerns. We are working on them. We're trying to retain somebody to help replace Dale. But when we talk about staff, we have one half staff. And maybe another half, a quarter one sometimes. We have mostly volunteers. So the purpose of the money was to work on some of the buildings, but also to have a few dollars for one of the staff members to try to start doing some kind of organizational grant research, try to be there, have some consistency instead of each board changing. So The reason I came up here after discussing so many different things is just to say, we really don't have 13 years worth of money, but we are working on it. We have things we can do. Purpose today is to see if there's some monies available. We know it's tight. If we can, get some monies, that'll help us, continue as we look for other sources of funding down the road. Anything you want to add on that?
You covered it. Do you want to discuss the visitor center at all?
John Austin, another board member coming up.
I'm curious though.
My name's John Austin. I would like to point out that there's not very many communities our size that are able to provide a museum for the young people of this community, as well as young people from Bloomfield, Aztec, Farmington, Durango, even as far away as Cortez. They can come down here and they can see a little bit of history. History has sometimes been put on the back burner. I'm prejudiced. I'm a retired history teacher. And, if you don't know your past, you're doomed to repeat the past. And we don't want that to happen. We want the children to understand that the people that came before us, this is how they lived, this is where they worked, this is what they had to work with. And in doing that, we're helping to preserve the history, not only of our community, but the state of New Mexico. I said my piece.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Austin.
Mayor Snow, I just, reading through the information concerning the combining of the visitor center and the museum we seemed to come to a real block because of the needs of both organizations, and both organizations are very clearly important to Aztec. My position at this point is to decide on some funds for the museum and for us not to stop looking at opportunities to get the visitor center on Main Street. It's a recommendation in the MRA, which we approved, and I just think it could really benefit downtown if we can figure that out. There are some possibilities about the Historic Society building. If we can find a different location for those records and so forth, then we might be able to get the visitor center to Main Street. So that's kind of my position, that we do offer some funding to the museum, but not just totally let this idea fall through to get the visitor center on Main Street. So.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
Jack, I have a quick question. How many days in the winter are you looking at staying open? Do you know? Have you any idea?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
So 4 days, basically?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be all day. I mean, it would be reduced hours, but at least there would be a presence. Yeah.
And as Commissioner Fry said, sorry.
Fry.
Yes, Mr. Fry said, I believe the museum is an important part of our downtown culture, too. I think it's important for our community. And I agree. I think we should find some funding for them. I don't know that we can do the whole 25,000. That's probably not a realistic look, but certainly some funding, definitely. Okay. As a matter of fact, for those who remember, we used to do a shootout every noon in the Pioneer Village. Yep. And I played an evil villain. Thank you. And I have a hearing loss because of the guns. But yeah, I'm a big supporter of that museum, and I'd like to find some way to help sustain them.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let it go. I am interested in learning more about the visitor center. I guess the impasse, but we can talk about that another time. I would like to go ahead and I guess thank you, Mr. Scott, for presenting that to us, and Mr. Hegarty for chiming in as well. I do appreciate the kind of filling in some of the gaps a little bit. So with that said, if there's no further discussion,
We haven't named a
We
number.
need to discuss a number,
okay.
I guess.
All right, well, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. Does anybody
We
want
have-
to open up the conversation?
Well, we have, according to the staff summary, we still have $24,860.
And Kathy, what happens, let's suppose, and I'm not suggesting that we spend it all, I'm not suggesting we spend none of it, but let's suppose we spend $1,
15, or
okay, just for argument's sake. And we're like, okay, the museum has $1, and we have $24,859 or whatever left over. What happens to that money? Does it just roll over? Is it something, does it go back to the general fund?
It will stay in the budget for this current fiscal year. It'll be available to the commission to use at its discretion should additional funding requests come forward, or if, for example, given your example, if you partially funded the museum at this point and then decided to revisit it, or the museum came forward again, say in March, that funding is available to the commission throughout the fiscal year.
Okay. And if we fund partial, so if we give them all of it, then if any other group comes to us this year, we're going to have to say, sorry, next year.
Unless
Get your
we
request in
are
sooner.
able to identify some other funds available within the budget, or we'll do a mid-year review, and if we felt that there were additional cash reserves and that there was direction from the commission to go ahead and establish a greater budget to be available for the remainder of the year, we could do that as well.
So that amount isn't statutorily
No,
bound, you know, you have X amount of dollars and that's it?
no, sir.
Okay.
That's just what's
All right.
budgeted.
All right.
Correct.
Well, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Kathy.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I was started to say was that that's what we have available, but, I mean, I really don't want to deplete it all the way down in case there
I
is
agree.
something
Right.
important that comes before us again that we feel like we want to, and like you said, we can always come back and revisit if we get through the year and see that we have, you know, something else that
Right.
we maybe could offer. With that being said, I think right at this point, I would like to recommend that we do 10,000 again. I don't know how you
agree.
guys feel about it, but
I
that's,
think it's,
I think that that's enough to make a little bit of to make a difference, and yet we can still, and then we can keep it
We can
in
look at it
our
again.
minds, and they can come forward again, and if things turn around a little bit or something, or if we don't have any other use
Right.
for it.
Right. Okay.
So would you like me to make that motion?
Is everybody in agreement?
I think so. yeah.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Stand for motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve the funding to the Aztec Museum in the amount of $10,000.
Second?
Okay. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Snover,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fry,
Aye.
Commissioner Swett,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Item B under business items is intent to adopt ordinance 2018-483, amending Chapter 26, Article 3, Division 2, Communications Tower and Antenna. Do we have somebody that's going to?
Good evening, Commission. This request comes from Community Development. This is to amend the existing chapter as it is in Chapter 26. Basically, what it comes down to is adding aesthetic requirements to new cell phone broadband towers, making them blend in more into their surroundings. So, for example, you see in different communities, they will ask cell phone companies to basically make their antenna look like a tree, pine tree. Palm tree, probably it's not going to look good in our area, but.
See a little out of place.
Yeah, but, you know, again, this is, you know, there's an argument that says, well, that's a huge pine tree, it really sticks out. But what it really is just trying to blend into the surrounding areas so that if you do live next to a cell phone tower, it basically mitigates the look of it. Just for your information, cell phone towers, the FCC, even with zoning guidelines, you have to have them. It's a safety issue. So this is basically, if we have to have them within our community, how do we make them so that they look more aesthetically pleasing to the surrounding neighborhoods and to the city as a whole?
Okay, thank you. All right, we can open up to any discussion, or does anybody have any questions, Ms. Saavedra, regarding this? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
So hearing no issues or questions or conversation, I would ask for a motion.
Mayor Snover, I move to approve intent to adopt ordinance 2018-483, amending Chapter 26, Article 3, Division 2, Communications Tower and Antenna.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Snover,
Aye?
Mayor Pro Tem Fry,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Snover,
Sype?
Commissioner Sly,
Aye.
Okay. I think everybody's just kind of anticipating this land use, and they're getting a little loopy, that's all, ahead of time. So with that said, thank you for bearing with us this evening, some of our hiccups. And we are ready to move into item 14 on the agenda, land use hearings. We have 4 of them on the agenda tonight. I'm not going to read through every single one, okay? But I am getting ready to read the land use hearing procedure, so please bear with me. It is a little bit lengthy and kind of wordy, but here we go. Okay. The following hearing procedure is for all hearings on tonight's agenda. So this covers all 4 of our land use hearings. A land use hearing registration form is located on the clerk's table. For those who wish to receive a copy of the results from this hearing, you must provide your full name and current mailing address in order to receive a copy of the land use hearing order. If you wish to testify and provide comment on the matter at issue, you must register with the clerk on the land use hearing registration form and be sworn in with staff, the applicant, identified parties, witnesses, and interested persons. The meeting tonight will be conducted under procedures mandated by the New Mexico Court of Appeals in Battershell v. City of Albuquerque, which are intended to protect the due process rights of all parties. Under this ruling, the following procedures will apply. Parties to the meeting will be identified, as will any witnesses. The parties may wish to give testimony, as well as any interested persons wishing to testify and provide comment. City staff has a responsibility to assist the commission in fully developing the meeting record and may testify. All persons offering testimony will be sworn in by the clerk, mayor, or city attorney who are authorized to administer oaths. All persons offering testimony will be subject to cross-examination by commission, city staff, and the parties to the hearing. Testimony will be limited to the relevant matter being heard. Okay. So, under procedure, the item to be decided at tonight's public hearings are item A, OG 18-02, Hillcorp Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Sam Cooley number 1, northwest-southwest of Section 9. Item B is OG 18-03, Hillcorp Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Brewington, southeast-northwest of Section 21. OG 18-04, Hillcorp Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Glen Swire number 1, southeast-southwest of Section 8. And D, this is the one we had to amend on the agenda, OG 18-05, Hillcorp Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Fay Burdette number 1, southwest-northeast of Section 9. Testimony will be limited by yours truly. And identification of parties. For the purpose of this meeting, applicants are defined as Hillcorp Incorporated. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the following that I just read, A through D, OG 1802, 03, 04, and 05. and any applicable federal, state, or municipal laws or regulations or criteria which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford us and other interested persons an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal on that issue. Any party as identified by the Commission may request a continuance of this hearing if able to provide documentation or evidence in support or opposition of the application in addition to what was available at the time that notice of this hearing was provided. And the conduct of land use hearings, unless there is a continuance, if a participant so requests before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, the record shall remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing. Okay, so we will start in this order of presentation. Staff will summarize the staff report to the extent necessary to enable those present to understand the issues before the commissioners. The commission members may then ask questions of staff, and the staff may be cross-examined by the applicant and parties. Secondly, the applicant, to include their witness or witnesses, have 15 minutes. The commission members may ask questions of the applicant. Cross-examination by staff and parties. Witnesses may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. And third, the parties, to include their witness or witnesses, have 10 minutes each. The commission members may ask questions of the parties. Cross-examination by staff and applicant witnesses may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. Oh man, I skipped like a whole page here. All right, I apologize. I didn't see the double side thing, so I am going to just go ahead and back up right now. So I read page 1 and then I jumped to page 3. So I'm going to jump over to page 2 and I'm going to go through this again because we had a little bit of a hiccup at the last meeting, and I'd rather go through it and do it right so we don't have any issues going forward. So other persons may be designated by the commission as parties if they can show to the satisfaction of the commission that they have an immediate, pecuniary, or direct interest in the outcome of the meeting. Witnesses are those persons designated by parties to present testimony on their behalf. Interested persons are those persons interested in the case but not identified as either a party or commission by party commission or a witness by any party. Aside from the applicant and city staff, are there any persons who wish to be identified as a party to this or these items? Okay, this is applicant. Okay, so aside from the applicants, are there any persons who wish to be identified as a party to these items? And according to this, I have Mr. Porter, I have Lorna Eagle, okay, I have Myra Blackburn, and Carrie is the applicant. The others are listed as applicant. They're all Carrie on all. Okay. All right. So please state your name, address, item you wish to be a party to. So Mr. Porter, you are on Land Use OG 18-03 on the Brewington hearing, correct? And Ms. Blackburn, 18-04, Glen Swire, correct? And let's see, I think there's one more. Ms. Eagle, also with the same one that Mr. Porter is on, 18-03, the Brewington land use hearing. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, and immediate procurement use. Okay. Please review the land use registration forms provided. Will you accept these as a party? The folks that just listed, they are on here.
Yes.
I'm happy to show them to you.
Yes.
City Attorney, do you feel the need to see these? They are on there, the folks we just listed. Okay. The commission is in agreement. We already have the list, along with any witnesses identified by the parties and or interested persons wishing to testify as indicated on the land use hearing registration form. Holy cow. We are now moving into the land use hearing part of this hearing. I'm trying to find my oath on here. I don't have, can
The
I?
ex parte.
Okay, here we go.
Right there,
Right
it's
there.
right
There on the
there.
wall.
Okay.
Don't we need to do that?
Okay. Is there a challenge to the jurisdiction of the City of Aztec Commissioners to hear any of the hearings on tonight's agenda? If so, please state the challenge at this time. Seeing none. Are there any conflicts of interest or personal biases to be declared by a commission member?
No.
Hearing none?
No.
I have none. Okay. Have there been any ex parte contacts regarding the upcoming matters that a commission member needs to declare?
No.
No.
Hearing none, we will move forward. Will the staff, the applicants, parties identified by commission, all witnesses and interested persons wishing to testify regarding the following items: OG 18-02, 18-03, 18-04, and 18-05, please stand and raise your right hand. So only those folks that have signed up.
Become an interested person. You have to be a witness to be an interested person.
You have to have signed on the land use hearing form when you came in.
And you're telling me to sit down, right?
Yes, sir.
He can sign it.
Okay.
We haven't sworn him in yet.
Okay, well, if we...
Mr.
all right.
Burkett?
So you can go ahead and sign in. We haven't sworn in
I
yet.
just want the opportunity to ask questions if you need or might.
Okay.
You still
Okay.
need to sign in.
Then you
You'll
need
still
to
need to sign in and be sworn in for this particular hearing. So if it's a specific one, then Chief Hill, if you'd be kind enough to kind of point out which one he would need to sign in on. Which one would you like to be?
The Lynn Swire.
Okay. Sorry, folks, hang on one second.
Is that number 2 or 3?
I would also like to sign that.
Okay.
That's land use C.
That's the one that's real close to this.
And folks, we're being a little, extra special, from the last land use hearing. We had a few hiccups, and we're just being very thorough and kind of deliberate to make sure we don't make the same mistakes. So, thank you for your patience.
Explain to him that this is a legal hearing. It's a legal.
And it's a legal
It's a
hearing.
legal hearing. so that's
And
fine.
yeah, and as Commissioner Sub just said, this is a legally binding hearing, so we have to do it right.
Just helps them understand. Yeah. Some people are like,
She just gave me 1 second.
oh. I know, and it's one of those things that doesn't matter every time you read it. It needs to be read it. And you can read it every time. It gets a little smooth. You will get some. I think.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yes, sir. Sorry about the mix-up. Okay, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
I may have gotten that, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I can sort that out. Okay, if you have signed one of these sheets, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth under penalty of perjury? Okay, please be seated. Okay. Following testimony and evidence must be directed toward the land use hearings that we've already discussed, OG 1802, 03, 04, and 05. Any applicable federal, state, or municipal laws or regulations or criteria which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford us and other interested persons an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal on that issue. Any party as identified by the commission may request a continuance of this hearing if able to provide documentation or evidence in support or opposition of the application, in addition to what was available at the time that notice of this hearing was provided. In the conduct of land use hearings, unless there is a continuance, if a participant so requests before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, the record shall remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing. And again, I'll go through the order. It will be staff, where commission members may ask questions of the staff, cross-examination by applicant and parties towards staff if necessary. Second will be the applicant. They will have 15 minutes per hearing, or per item of the hearing. The commission members may also ask questions of the applicant. Cross-examination by staff and parties. Witnesses may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. And then third is parties to include their witnesses, and you have 10 minutes, or up to 10 minutes each party. And the commission members may ask questions of the parties. Cross-examination by staff and applicant. Witnesses may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. And fourth is interested persons, 5 minutes each. The commission members may ask questions of interested persons. Cross-examination by staff, applicant, and parties. Interested persons may be cross-examined but do not have the authority to cross-examine. And then the hearing will then be closed to testimony, and the commission may discuss the issue amongst themselves. The commission will then make a decision and issue findings of fact and conclusions of law, move into closed session pursuant to New Mexico Statute 10.15.1 H-1, the Open Meetings Act exception, continue the public hearing until a specified time, or take the matter under advisement and announce their recommendation at a specified time. Okay. Again, apologies for that, but I wanted to make sure we got through it and did it correctly. So our first land use hearing on the agenda is item A, OG 18-02, Hillcorp Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Sam Cooley, number 1, northwest, southwest of Section 9. Mr. Saavedra.
Good evening once again, City Commission. This is a land use application, OG 1802, from Hillcorp, represented by Carrie Hutchinson. Subject property is located on this picture. I'm going to dim the lights so you can see a little bit better.
Hey, Stephen, could you pull the mic down or?
A gesture.
As you can see right here, it's actually located between A&W, which is right here, and High Country. O'Reilly's is right there. It sits at a lower grade from Aztec Boulevard, also known as New Mexico 516. As you can see on the zoning map, it's located in a C2 zoning district. The applicant comes before you because, well, basically they're they are modifying the well. And under city code, oil and gas, any modifications need to come before the city commission. City staff evaluated the site, has not received any comments or concerns regarding this application. However, staff is concerned with and has raised some comments regarding the gravel or mud that does exist on this right-of-way here throughout different years. Currently, there is gravel right now. City staff is recommending that gravel be maintained. In addition to that, a concrete apron to basically guard the gravel that would come off onto the street, so we're not calling the street sweeper, you're not getting the calls, or more importantly, we're not getting mud on the street. In addition to that, city staff is recommending approval with that condition along with some screening and landscaping. Now keep in mind, screening and landscaping by no means is to completely shield the visual of the wells, but what it is to mitigate. And I will go through some pictures of screening to have an idea. This one right here is near Pepsi Way. It's the screening. As you can see, you can still see the wells, but it is to mitigate. This is where we're at right here. This is the current well. This is, again, by Pepsi Way. By no means does it hide it. We see a derrick right there. But where we see some pine trees in and outside of the well pad, some screening, it just helps blend in the appearance. So this is to give you an idea what screening looks like. Again, it's not to have it go away by any means. This is actually by Bison Trail. And you see the screening here versus the screening here. Does it help? Yes. Does it remove the site completely? No. So with that, we're recommending approval with the listed conditions. Please keep in mind those are recommendations and conditions from staff. City Commission has the opportunity to set their own conditions, no conditions. Findings of facts were suggested by city staff. By all means, please feel free to alter any of those findings of facts as you see fit. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Okay, so my question about the screening is, so this one is currently unscreened, just from what I see, right?
This is the fence right here. Yes.
Okay,
It's unscreened.
okay.
And there is the gravel that exists out of two.
So your recommendation is to approve with the addition of those conditions that you added, as far as the screening, the additional gravel for the road, the
Correct.
cement apron to mitigate basically big clouds of mud potentially being
Mud, gravel helps.
debris, whatever, right?
Absolutely. But what gravel also ends up on the street as well. So
Right.
an apron typically mitigates the gravel / mud into the street.
Okay. And that's fairly common?
In regards to, so yes, an apron.
Yeah.
Yes, in different jurisdictions, different municipalities, it's not only common, it's a requirement. And this
Okay.
is not for oil and gas necessarily, but for residential uses. So just go to our neighbors west, any residential dwelling unit that accesses a right-of-way, unless it's in a large agricultural district, is required to have a concrete apron. So yes, it is fairly common.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question for Mr. Svedra. What area, in looking at this and knowing the area, I guess what area are you proposing that they screen? The whole well site?
That's correct.
So from back behind this tank, clear up to where we can't see, right? Is that,
So- Yes, I mean,
Okay.
that's my suggestion is screening. If you look at the oil and gas code, that chapter, it talks about screening. Screening, it doesn't say half of the pad, it doesn't say all the pad, it says screening.
Okay.
So the way that I interpret that is the pad.
okay, the entire, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
So I guess if it's part of city ordinance, then that should be, I mean, and maybe this is kind of a rhetorical question, I don't know. If it's part of city ordinance, then it should be automatically included in the application process,
Well, if you-
possibly?
If you look at the city ordinance, it says site-specific, so it gives some flexibility
Okay.
in terms of, is this site appropriate to have landscaping and screening, or to have one or the other? It is up to city commission to decide if this site is appropriate
Okay.
for either of those.
Okay.
Same thing.
So it's kind of a case-by-case thing?
Case by case.
Right.
You know, and this is why there's conditions, not just with this, but with any application, that, you know, maybe the concrete apron is not appropriate in this case. Maybe a gravel actually is not appropriate, but maybe let's just pave it all the way. It is up to city commission to make that determination based on the specific site, based on what the neighborhood, overall, general community feels would be best for Aztec.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
One more
Yeah.
question.
No, it's fine.
Stephen, Ms. Unsicker, sorry, pointed out to us that in the staff summary that you did mention the beautification, I think it's in the second paragraph on the second page of this that says, staff feels screening and landscaping advances Aztec's beautification efforts, and then goes on to the screening and landscaping, but it's not in the findings of facts. So do we need to, add that, or?
Again, those are my suggested findings of facts. This is me going through the report.
Okay.
Can I clarify something in that real quick? So if you look under community development, it recommends approval with the following conditions. Under section 2, it does mention pursuant to COA code 15-32. I'm sorry. Yes. That does speak to beautification.
Okay.
But I would just recommend that if you want landscaping or screening or both, that we just be more specific with what we want, because if we just cite that code, it covers a lot of different things.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just add one other thing too? There is a landscaping quota found in chapter 26, which talks about, and this is primarily for commercial development. So for example, O'Reilly's, they had to have landscaping. That's a requirement. Part of that is one tree over 6 feet for every 500 square feet. One plant for every 500 square feet, and one bush. There's not the specifics within chapter 15, so if you choose to go with landscaping, if you could be specific in terms of what you feel is appropriate for the given site, just as clarifications on that matter. And then again, those findings of facts with all the applications are just my suggestions. You're free to, well, what's going to happen after the land use hearing is we're going to take your word as the finding of fact and go with that.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for Mrs. Saavedra?
Not this time.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Okay. Next in order of presentations is our applicant. We have Ms. Hutchins from Hill Corp. Good evening, Ms. Hutchins.
Good evening, Commission. Good evening, Mayor Snover. It's happy to be here with you again. I've been here many times, this time with Hill Corp. So it's good to be back with Hill Corp. We've seen a lot of turnover here in the oil and gas industry, as you all have been watching. And I think I'd like to, if I could, just preface this discussion, since all of these are going to be recompletion applications, by just describing to the Commission what we are talking about here, so that perhaps any of the citizens, if some of their questions revolve around that, they have an idea of what all these applications are asking for. And again, all four are asking for the same thing, so this summary will suffice for all of them. So all of the applications before you today are existing well locations. They've all been here since the 50s or the 60s. Currently, we all hope some basic geology. There are different formations underneath the ground, and all of these are currently producing from a formation we call the Dakota. We are coming for the Commission to seek to also produce from a formation called the Mesa Verde. We are not drilling any additional wells. We are not doing any additional surface disturbance. We aren't enlarging the pad in any way. We aren't going to increase the number of personnel that visit the site. We are not going to increase the sound or the visual emissions on the site. So the operation of the site will be unchanged. By all appearances, it will be unchanged. Any people living in the vicinity will notice no difference. All of the change will be underground. It'll just produce from an additional formation. And I think that's pretty neat and pretty unique for this basin. All the other companies that have gone before have been really focused on new drills. So they've worked to expand the number of well pads in the area, drilling more well pads, clearing more area, building more access roads, making more wells in the ground. And Hill Corp is doing things very differently. So they're taking the existing infrastructure and all the existing wells that they have, and they're just trying to make them produce better. So instead of adding a bunch of new wells, they're just working on cleaning out and improving the performance of the existing wells. So as a citizen of Aztec, I think that's pretty cool. Because we can get increased revenue, we can get increased production without any additional impacts, any additional traffic, any additional wellbores. Now, additional wellbores may come in the future. I don't know. It's speculation at this point. But for now, Hill Corp's, all that they've really been doing is coming in and just making existing infrastructure perform better. So I think that's pretty neat. And so hopefully people in the audience, that will put their minds at ease a little bit. So coming to the specifics of this application, Hillcorp has zero issue with helping to beautify Aztec. We all live in this community. Everyone that our office is in Aztec. Many of us are from Aztec, myself included. So we're all happy to live here. We appreciate how Aztec is becoming more and more beautiful, getting more and more foot traffic. I love all of the ideas that are coming out of the Community Development Department for new parks and new recreation. We're on board for that. We just want to make sure that we're doing this in instances where it makes sense. So this site is kind of an unusual site. As you know, it is in kind of a hole, for lack of a better word, if I may approach. So I took some pictures. Stephen did a great job of putting together a good PowerPoint, so I didn't want to have a competing PowerPoint, but I did just want to provide it just a few other pictures from where most of the citizens of Aztec are going to see this particular well. So I have some photos across the street from A&W as someone would be traveling westbound. I have some photos as if you're walking on the sidewalk right in front of the well where the gravel access road is. And then I have some photos from the A&W parking lot, just to give you kind of a full spectrum of how people in the city would be looking down on the well. So two-thirds of it is already screened visually by the natural topography, because as I said, it does kind of sit in a sink. Even from the road, it's sunken down from the road. And so a lot of it is already screened visually just because of the natural topography that exists. Further, this is a very wet area. It's one of the few parts of Aztec that's naturally very wet, and so we have a lot of just gorgeous vegetation down here already. There are lots of willows and sedges. We have a lot of trees and bushes. So it's actually already naturally landscaped quite beautifully. As you can see, there are a couple places when you're directly in front of it on the road that goes by high country, where there are some gaps in the trees and you can see the well. And so perhaps that would be a good place to visually screen, although it is still sunken in and mostly covered by vegetation. So as I said, Hillcorp definitely wants to landscape where it makes sense, but in this particular site, there are lots of places that are already screened, and the landscaping would be unnoticed. And further, a visual screening fence would provide really little change because of the natural topography. And then one other thing that I think is very important, Aztec I know is very business friendly, and we live in a very oil and gas friendly community. All of us are affected by oil and gas, whether we're directly employed in the oil and gas industry, or whether our father owns a tire shop, or our neighbor owns a restaurant that's frequented by oil and gas employees. This vibrant community is very much impacted by oil and gas. The landscaping and visual mitigation requirements requested to landscape this entire site and provide a visual screening fence is, our construction group estimates $30,000 to $40,000 to do that work, which again, if it's important to beautify Aztec, we're on board for, but if it's already naturally screened and naturally vegetated, then that's an unnecessary expense for a project that will yield an economic benefit, but this is not a huge moneymaker. All of our projects, like I said, we take existing kind of junk and dust it off and make it produce better. So if these types of requirements are added onto projects, it could make projects like this uneconomic, where we could take a project that could generate a little bit more income, generate a little bit more production, and make it unfeasible. And so it could really suppress future improvements, because that's a pretty large expense for landscaping and screening. So that's that. We have no problem maintaining gravel. We maintain gravel on the site already. As you can see in one of the pictures, there's pretty deep gravel, and as you can see in Stephen's photo here, there's great gravel all the way around the pad. So that's something that we routinely do. That's something we don't plan on stop doing. We can always add a concrete apron. That's no problem. We're happy to do that to protect the streets.
Okay.
Questions?
Anybody? I'll yield.
Go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Seib? Commissioner Seib?
Not a question, just I have, when we get to our discussion.
Okay, okay. I did notice, Ms. Hutchins, that at the kind of the intro, I guess, for lack of a better word, you had said that these sites, are they currently producing?
They are.
Okay. I assumed that was correct. Now, you said that the Hillcorp the intent is to make them more efficient and be able to produce more So I assume that means you're going to drill a little bit deeper into the next layer, into the Mesa Verde shale formation or whatever it's
We're
called.
actually coming up. We're going a little bit shallower. And so
Okay.
we're going to we have casing that runs down the length of the wellbore so that we're only confining our production from one formation. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to perforate our casing so that we can produce from one layer higher. So we're not deepening it. And over time, as you draw from one formation, it's going to slowly, the return is going to be less and
Right.
less and less as the life of the well goes down. And so by producing from another formation, we're able to make this well have like kind of a new lease on life.
So what has prevented whoever, I guess, is Hillcorp kind of a new owner of this well, I guess?
That's correct. Yeah, all these wells were owned by ConocoPhillips or XTO, and Hillcorp purchased ConocoPhillips in August of last year.
Okay.
And XTO just this past year in the spring.
So what prevented them from doing that? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what
Right.
is,
Well, we all know what happened to the oil and gas industry in 2014 with the gas and oil prices really dropping significantly. And we saw the huge impact that had not only on the local producers, many of which have since gone out of business, unfortunately, and many of the workers have gone to the Permian Basin. We've had this mass exodus of work, and all of the basin, with the exception of BP, who's just gone up for sale, and Marion and Dugan, have really changed hands. And that's because of the gas price. That's because all those companies couldn't make it work. So to answer your question directly, they weren't spending money on these wells.
Okay.
Because the oil and gas industry has been in such a state of disrepair. And those companies really have more of a business plan of drilling new wells. And Hillcorp's really kind of unique in that they take, I'm going to call them junk for lack of a better word, and kind of dust them off and clean them up and make them produce more, which is, it's an interesting business model that we haven't seen here a lot, maybe from some of the smaller companies, but definitely not from a large major company like ConocoPhillips.
okay. What's the footprint, of Hillcorp as far as their holdings, I guess, and their territory, I guess? So
Yeah. So it's a privately held domestic oil and gas company. So they only operate in the United States. This is their first time operating in New Mexico, the acquisition of the San Juan Basin. They operate in Texas, they operate in Alaska, Louisiana, and Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Okay. And I kind of made a note when you said nothing was going to change from a visual or kind of, it's one of those things where if the layperson driving by is not going to notice any difference in what goes on at that place. It's not going to be expanded. It's not going to be another well drilled. So the only changes that are going to occur are underground. How, and I'm not in the oil and gas industry, so please, kind of bear with some of these elementary style questions. But what are you doing differently?
So you're absolutely correct. There will be no change. There will be a few days of increased activity before we move the rig on. They'll set the rig up. Halliburton and the rig will be on for 1 day. Then most of the crew will move off. They'll set the rig down. They'll move it off. So there'll be a few days of increased activity. Right now, you really only see the guy who services the well in and out. It's very minimal. And so there'll be more people there for a few days just to get the rig up, just to change this formation, and that's it. So yeah, all of it's downhole. No changes to anything. The well's not deepening. We're just changing where we produce from. So we're just making changes to perforate our casing so that we can produce from a different formation. That's the only difference.
So the way in which you extract the gas is not going to change?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. Yeah, no changes at all, just a different layer of rock.
Okay. So we're already fracking in that, or we're fracking in that, at that well site?
I don't know. Most of these probably were fracked when they were drilled. Fracking in the basin started in the 1950s, was when it became a regular thing. And so that's been happening there. This isn't a horizontal well that you hear about in the news. This is just an old school vertical well that, yeah, in the 50s might have been fracked.
And it will be again for this?
We're just perforating in a new layer.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not nothing like no big new drill, no big horizontal operation.
Okay. Because I read in the, here, if I can find it. I guess it's part of the application that was included. I don't obviously have this up here. It's where it's got the Hillcorp Energy Company, Sam Cooley 1, Mesa Verde, recompletion sundry, the job procedures, and that's where it just kind of talks about the fracking fluid and the pressure, I guess, it's going to be used. You know, and again, I'm not okay, frack the Mesa Verde, item 12, in one stage, top perforation at 4,000 feet, bottom perforation at 4,560 feet.
So yeah, we do use frac fluids, and we do use similar procedures, but it's very different from the big horizontals that, you know, we're used to associating with the word fracking. So I don't personally like to use that word. I feel like this is a very different procedure. But yes, we do shoot fluid and a little bit of pressure to begin the production from that area, just to fissure the rock a little bit. But yeah, it's just an old school vertical well.
I don't like to use that word either.
Yeah.
And that's
like
when I read it here,
to people.
My ears definitely perked up a little bit.
Right, yeah. And I feel like it is more misleading than it is illuminating in this case.
Okay. I'll have to take your word for that.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions, I mean, definitely I'm here to stand for them.
And in the proximity for this particular well, you know, and again, I take you at your word. I have no reason to disbelieve any of this stuff. And again, I'm not an expert. I am concerned. You know, I get this stuff, you know, because I'm just a lay person. I don't know some of the technical jargon, but I have heard that word before.
Sure.
Many times, and it's almost never in a positive light.
Well, if you have lived in New Mexico for a while,
I have not.
I would
4
argue
years.
that you have heard it in a positive light many times. I mean, all of us in the community have benefited from the oil and gas production in this basin for decades now.
Okay, I don't have any further comments, at least unless somebody kind of makes something break loose in my brain while you guys are.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
In looking at the photographs, indeed, there is a lot of natural vegetation and so forth around this one. And of course, this one is in the middle of our city.
It is.
So I believe you said something about maybe adding partial screening in those places where there's not this natural vegetation to assist in the beautification, because this is in the middle of our city.
Right, it certainly is. And I guess if it was, you know, if I could persuade, if the commission really wanted to add some sort of screening, if by the photos they feel like the amount of screening, while it is still a lot, is insufficient, I would recommend screening along the sidewalk where there may be pedestrian traffic, maybe people walking more slowly, maybe people looking. Certainly not the sides from the A&W or from the highway or from high country, because of the depression that the well sits in. I just don't think it would be effective, and it wouldn't be as visual as perhaps someone walking on the sidewalk.
Well, my preference is the natural vegetation, because that really hides
Especially
hides
on
things
this
better.
side, it really is lovely.
Yeah, okay. Just one more question in the concern about fracking and all the things that we hear. You know, our community is concerned about health and the methane cloud that hangs over the Four Corners. Is Hillcorp being conscientious about, I mean, are these wells going to be improved over past years with attention to any leaking and these sort of issues that we're all worried about?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So we spend a lot of time and money looking at all these locations frequently. We can confirm that none of them currently have any leaks or any emissions that are above the standard. We have air quality controls on everything that we comply with. When ConocoPhillips had the basin, we reduced our air emissions by over 50%. So all of these wells in the city and in the basin that Hillcorp acquired from ConocoPhillips have already undergone major technological improvements to drastically improve their air quality. So yeah, and Hillcorp is still kind of riding on the coattails of those improvements, but continues to make improvements where possible. Also to sound, you know, we use sound dampening equipment on these wells at all times. So yeah, we're constantly improving them, and especially in the city. I mean, we're conscious of all the wells, but in the city we try to be a little bit extra careful with our fencing for safety, and you know, we're conscious of our emissions on all of them. But with the sound, we're more particular in the city.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So are they meeting federal guidelines at
They
this
are.
moment?
They are.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't.
Were there any people that,
No, there were no
Okay.
folks that signed up for this particular, this very first land use hearing. So there are no parties and there are no witnesses. Are there any,
so it's up to
is there any other discussion?
May I make
Or
one
any-
final comment, Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate Mr. Saavedra's comment about the landscaping requirements for O'Reilly's, and I think that that site looks great, and that's a great addition to the city. I do think a well site is slightly different than a commercial business. People aren't going to be parking and coming in the doors to shop. People will not be interacting with this well. I mean, as you can see the photos in front of you, the access road's very long. People aren't going to be walking up to the well and walking in the door. So I think that to apply a commercial landscaping standard to an oil and gas well is not appropriate. That's not to say I don't think landscaping is appropriate. I just think that kind of a quick and easy plug and play of adopting the commercial landscaping standards to an oil and gas well, I don't think that there are many situations where that is appropriate, and the commission should continue to take that on a case-by-case basis.
I can agree with that. However, and I personally, I don't think that was the intent of Mr. Saavedra's comment. I do think the intent is that, and because that well is smack dab in the middle of Aztec, I see it every single day when I drive by. It's right in proximity to the entrance to the turn to go to Aztec Ruins. As we move forward with, hopefully in the next several years or maybe sooner, our MRA development, our moving towards maybe developing the North Main plot, that is going to be even a more heavily concentrated, more than it is now. I think, what was the number, 24,000 cars a day go by there? And hopefully that will be increasing over the weeks, years, and months, or months and years to follow as we improve our tourism draw here. So to maybe not have, some boxwood shrubs along the sidewalk perhaps or around there, but also to keep in mind that, even after that well has expended its life, it's still going to be sitting there, and we're still going to be driving past it. And my concern is that, and I appreciate that everybody that's in business is trying to make money. That's what we do in America. But I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are going to be the ones that look at this every day. And we are going to be the ones that are left with whatever, good or bad, fallout from this in any, whether it be any well site in the city. We're just talking about this one directly right now. And I'm especially sensitive to the ones inside the city limits to look as palatable as possible. So I would definitely, and we'll cover this here momentarily, but I definitely think that needs to be a strong consideration as we move forward.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate your input on that.
Yeah, and just to note, when the well is no longer productive, we'll plug it and abandon it. And at that point, we recontour it to match the natural contours of the land. We reseed it, we revegetate the site, and then we come back a few years after and make sure that the reseeding was effective and successful. So it won't always be there.
Okay.
Just to clarify.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm an East Coast guy, so
Yeah.
I'm not.
That's what they do.
Any more questions for me?
I have none.
No.
Mr. Saavedra?
You're exactly correct. The topography does slow down, so the natural vegetation does, hide it to some extent. But one thing I just wanted to add is that 24,000 cars passed by last year, and that was probably one of the lowest traffic counts that we ever got throughout the region. So on a given year, it's 27,000, if not higher. As city planners, we look at what's going to happen in the future, not just what's present right now. So if you look at where the site is, you look at where O'Reilly's is at, this is actually one of the sites that is suited in part for development. There's 3 parcels. So even though there's not a site right now, and even if there was another commercial building, and that's the hope for Aztec, at least from the city, to get another development there, landscaping mitigation might help. But again, the topography, as Carrie correctly pointed out, already does a good job. It's, again, it's city staff to recommend that, could something happen there in the future that somebody might say, maybe my business would have done better if I just
Right.
didn't have to look.
So there actually is potential that somebody would be parking their car there and walking into a future business and walking past that,
It's
in
our-
proximity to it,
It's our hope when we look at any of these parcels that we just don't look at it right now, but we
Right.
look at what can be developed there.
Correct.
And what ramifications could occur at that time.
Okay.
So that's why the suggestion, but, again, Carrie is correct. It does slow down the natural vegetation that exists. There is some cattails, which concerns me for a whole other reason. That's just in general with the area, floodplain, all that good stuff. But this is not in the floodplain, mind you. So, but that's what we look at, is not just what it is right now. If I walk down there, what does it look like? What is it going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? So that's kind of what we do as planners. Are we wrong? Probably more times than not we are. But anyways.
Thank you, Mr. Phaedra. Okay. So, considering we have no other parties that are signed up to discuss this first land use hearing, I am going to close to all testimony and then open it for discussion amongst the commission. So, Commissioner Sapp, you said you had something for this portion?
Yes, I do. My concern is, I think I agree with Commissioner Fry or Mayor Pro Tem Fry that the natural landscaping is much better. So to have them plant a tree or a bush down there, I think the natural landscaping is good. I'm not saying that we shouldn't maybe still require some screening, because of the proximity to possibly development there by O'Reilly's. To screen the whole thing, I'm just not sure that that's, I don't want to say feasible, because, anything's doable, but I don't think it's going to serve the purpose that we think the screening's going to serve with the way that it slopes down in, I guess is my thinking. And I do realize that, reworking the well, it's not going to change any of the other aspects of the well pad. I think the natural landscaping is the best way to go. And like I said, I would probably go for some screening where it's the most visible. I don't think putting it up by the sidewalk is really, even though you'd have to look down, I just think it would help if it's closer. I think you're just asking for trouble if it's up by the sidewalk. It'll get knocked over or something. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I may add, following up what Commissioner Seif said, about the native landscaping, maybe on the north side of where that pad's at, you could put something that's a little taller, native type stuff like a New Mexico privet or something like that.
You can get native
shrubs.
plants too.
I think that'd be more attractive than having to put in a bunch of screening and such, just
Right.
because I think it looks nicer. As far as screening the whole, or I'm sorry, fencing and the whole thing, I think if you're up on Aztec Boulevard, you're going to see it more anyway, because I think that makes it stand out even more.
I think so too.
So I don't know that that's a really good option. But that's just my opinion.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I too like the natural landscaping, and if additional landscaping, partial can assist in blocking the view from the major highways, I would support that. And I'm not saying that screening the whole thing would be beneficial.
Okay. Well, and I'll just add my 1 cent before we move forward, I guess, unless somebody else comes up with something else on the commission panel. My concern, and I'm kind of pointing out one of the statements she made early in her portion of the hearing, was essentially, and again, I understand you don't want to buy something that you don't need, or pay for something you may not need, or maybe you don't deem that you need it. But maybe somebody else in a similar circumstance couldn't live without it, okay? You might be able to drive your old clunker Corolla for another 100,000 miles, and I may say, and no offense to anybody if they have a clunker Corolla, I have a little clunker Matrix. But, you know, the point that I'm trying to make is that there may be others that say, well, no, I want to get a new car every 3 years or 4 years or whatever. So that is definitely you know, can vary depending on the person you talk to, but I am a little concerned that, and I guess I'll just, and I'm not trying to be combative, but to hear that, well, you know, if we have to do this, if we're forced to, you know, landscape our well sites, we may just decide not to do it, and we might just move on. That is concerning to me. And it sounds like, you know, we might just decide it's not worth our trouble. So kind of, I feel like I'm being steered a little bit towards not wanting to follow through on that landscaping requirement, in possible fear or concern, if that's a better word, that we won't have this revenue, this purported revenue or proposed revenue and improved performance. You know, that they might just abandon it and leave it to be shut down or plugged and then reseeded, as I was informed, you know, educated on a few minutes ago. So that's kind of my concern, is that I feel that it's kind of like, you know, we really want you to do this, and we'd hate to have to walk away from it if we have these extra requirements that we don't deem necessary as Hillcorp folks towards this particular site. So that's my concern. So,
Mr. Mayor, I guess I didn't take it the same way that you understood it. I think my understanding is that, you know, they've looked at the cost of doing what staff had, you know, screening the entire project or the entire well pad and doing commercial landscaping, you know. And I realize that the companies, they do have to look at, you know, they're, like you said, that's the American way, they're there to make money. But I think Carrie did say that, you know, that Hillcorp is very interested in the landscaping and stuff. So I think, I don't know, I guess I didn't take it the same way that you take it, that it was like a,
and that's why we
know,
have this discussion. You know,
exactly,
so.
Right. And so, again, I would like to see us maybe, I liked Commissioner Lewis's idea of just maybe some taller natural rather than the screening. I think I agree that the screening is just going to make it stand out even more, where if we can do the natural vegetation, and maybe we could maybe put that in something taller at the one end where it is more visible, or on the spots where it is more visible, and not have to go to the screening and the, just a thought. I mean, I just didn't take it the same way that you took it, I guess.
That's fine.
Sorry.
No apology needed.
Mr. Mayor, the reason I brought that up, I just think if you're in a place where there's too many fences, too many screens, it begins to look really industrial, really, and I don't want that. Anyway, and this is hardly that, of course, but I don't want to lend that to our city's ambiance if I can avoid it. And so I think natural plantings, they blend, they hide. You're not going to hide everything, like you said, like Mr. Saavedra has said, but certainly it would help to camouflage a bit.
So we could add that to our findings of fact, like some more taller natural landscaping, I guess.
Okay.
So,
I think, right?
Can anybody word a motion?
Oh, sorry. I know, I can't. Yeah. No, okay. I think we're
Are we ready for a motion?
Can I just say one thing? I would
Yes,
just
ma'am.
encourage you to be specific in what you're wanting to do with the landscaping. If you're looking at sides, if you're looking at, you know, the screening versus the natural local vegetation, things like that.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any more discussion on this first land use item, 18-02? Hearing none, I will close discussion and entertain a motion. And please, like the city attorney
Why don't you
said,
make
be
it
specific.
based on what you were referring to?
Okay. Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve OG 18, this is -2, right?
Yes, sir.
I've got the wrong one, I apologize. -2, I'd skipped onto the next one, I apologize.
Page 48 is the,
Oh, thank you. OG, thank you. OG 18-2, oil and gas modification of an existing gas well in northwest, southwest of section 9, T30N, R11 West, 1865 feet FSL, 1310 FWL, City of Aztec, San Juan County, New Mexico, with the provisions that natural landscaping be applied to areas to the north, west, and east surrounding the edge of the pad most visible from Aztec Boulevard. And the findings of fact as presented. Sorry.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
second.
Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Snowberg,
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Fred,
Aye.
Commissioner Sykes,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood,
Aye.
motion passes 3-1.
Okay. All right, next item is OG 18-03 Hill Corp. Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Burlington, southeast northwest of Section 21. Ms. Hutchin, or I'm sorry, Mr. Saavedra.
Commission. This is oil and gas, 1803, specific to this given area. And I apologize for not going to the site specifically to get a good understanding, boots on the ground type of thing. I'm not sure why this keeps moving on me. The zoning, it's very strange because the oil well sits on two parcels. So it's actually C2 here and A1 there, so it has a mixed use of zoning. The zoning does not affect this application by any means. There is residential within the area. Part of the problem that I had was access, how to get there. I could not find necessarily the access path, and so this site needs to be considered with the specific uniqueness to it. As you can see, I laid out gravel and so forth, and possibly an apron if necessary, but I just need the applicant to clarify where access is at, because it may not be necessary for this specific one. Nevertheless, there is still residential, and so we're still with the same recommendations, screening landscape and so forth, so that it would, again, how about the community? And I can go through the whole list run by run, what it is, but I think Ms. Hutchinson said it best, what they're planning to do. So in the spirit of time, she said it. They applied for all the same. So.
Yeah, it's basically the same concerns and issues on almost all of them, really, as far as the pad and the gravel and.
Yeah, and if I could just be, this is part of it. When we received the application, this is what we had, highlighted different things in red, what we were missing. Keep in mind, the pad is already there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this stuff is not necessarily relevant. But nevertheless, that's what we asked for. Again, screening, this is what it looks like. This is just opinion of staff. It is to help it blend in. Definitely understand the concern that maybe it makes it more industrial, but the whole idea is just that blending in factor so that it camouflages it again. This is not too far from the area. Mm-hmm. These are conditions and waivers. I forgot to point that out in the previous one. That is part of city code, but you appropriately executed the last one. City staff would just recommend, if you are going to make specific requirements, that it's very specific to how many, if there is landscaping. So is that 4 trees? Is that 2 trees? what type of trees, how tall, so that we're very clear on, and the applicant is very clear, if that's a condition, they have better direction. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay.
Stephen, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
Ed, could you, or Stephen, one of you guys point out exactly where, I think that's the motel? No? That's the well pit, that's the well site.
Actually over here, yeah.
Okay. So it's.
This is the correct location, correct? Here. Yeah.
That's
So-
the location.
So this is, Pepsi Way is right over
Right there, okay.
Yeah.
Show where the Farmington substation is.
Farmington substation, where there was some screening, is right there.
Okay.
Falcon Bluff, right there. Now, here's another thing to keep in mind. We've had some discussions on staff about what is an actual right-of-way. That's another question. To our understanding, this is not a platted right-of-way. So that's why hence putting concrete aprons on a right-of-way, and that's why hopefully the applicant can speak on direct access, where they're accessing the site from, so that there's no issues with property owners. Because we did have a concern on, are they coming through my property to access the site? So hopefully that'll be cleared up by the applicant.
Okay, now is this Bison Trail that's up, that's the.
Bison Trail is
the-
further down.
That's what I was thinking, that's for, so what housing, I guess I'm trying to figure out what housing is.
Falcon Bluff is the nearest, right around here.
I'm
This
sorry?
is Falcon Bluff.
Fa-
right
Oh,
here.
Falcon Bluff, okay.
And this is technically how it's addressed.
Okay, I was just trying to
Yeah.
get my bearings, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else have any questions of Mr. Saavedra?
Mayor, how far is the housing, the residents from this one? These aren't located really closely, are they? They're
436 feet or something
They're
like
not,
that?
I mean, it's relative. So over 400 feet is the closest
okay.
one.
446 feet is the nearest residence.
So, little, kind of,
Now, keep in mind, there is
1.5 football fields.
oil pad around here that's already screened as it is. It's not close to any residence. It's actually this one here. Again, you see it. So, yeah, it's just to mitigate. But that one's not near any residential. It's further out, further west. And so it's within the area due west. Is-
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Mr. Saavedra. Okay, we are going to move on to our applicant, Ms. Hutchins. Thank you again.
Forest Commission. So in regards to the access question, in the application packet, there's a section labeled Surface Owner Agreement, and there is a document in that section titled Grant of Right-of-Way and Easement. So that should sufficiently describe our access and our right-of-way to get to this site. There are numerous ways in. Actually, the access agreement is very broad. It can be accessed many of these locations, or many of these directions, from the highway directly and into the site, or from Pepsi Way and over. We can actually even get to it from our office on Crouch Mesa. So there are lots of different ways in and out, depending on who's going in and what's most efficient. That's kind of how they go in. For purposes of the rig, I assume we'll be pulling it in directly from the main road and in. That's the shortest, most direct access. And like I said, that's just a little bit more personnel a couple of days before to bring the rig equipment in. They set the rig up. That's one day the rig will be up, and then just a couple of days after to break it all down. So just a few days of additional activity beyond what we typically see on this site. So any landowners in the vicinity, there will be additional noise for the one day that the rig is working. Other than that, there will be a few additional cars, like I said, just bringing the equipment in, setting everything up, but it's going to be a very short period, and then they'll be off. And traffic will resume normal. Any questions for me?
Mr. Mayor, I have one. Could you point out perhaps where that easement, the right of access is for me?
So it covers sections 21 and 22. We unfortunately don't have the section lines marked on this particular one. But like I said, we have options for the access areas. We may come in from the highway and then down. And we come in this way down. This is a pretty well-established network of roads back here. So there are a few different options. Tie them together, because a lot of those wells in there are ours. So, for example, the person who has this run might string a few together on his way to access it and hit all of them on the way. I'm not sure which way the pumper goes in on this one typically.
Okay. Mr. Badger, did you have
Since I live there, would you like me to clarify whether you're doing that?
if you would, wait 1 second, please. Mr. Sabedra.
I'm sorry, you said the main route. Can you figure out what is the main route?
So I don't know which way the pumper typically goes in. I think we're planning on pulling the rig in from the main road. We're not sure exactly which way.
Which would be right here on this map, right here.
Okay, so we'll be coming in the other way. That's my mistake. So we'll be coming in the from the west on this map.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. I hope that didn't cause any confusion.
And that's a maintained road by you, your company, by Hillcorp.
Well, probably, yeah. We maintain all of our roads, and some of them are cost share roads, but this isn't a large enough road to be a cost share road that many companies would add to. So yeah, we maintain all of our oil and gas roads regularly throughout the year, usually in conjunction with the BLM road group.
Okay. I don't have any questions on this particular one. Does anybody else have any further comment or question of Ms. Hutchins at this moment?
I apologize again for the misunderstanding.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so we are going to move on to, we've talked to the staff and the applicant. Next is, we have two folks that are parties to this. Well, let me clarify first. Mrs. Eagle, are you considered a party or an interested person?
My home's within 400 feet.
Okay, so I would assume that identifies her as a party to this. Because it says citizen, I just want to make sure that we're giving you the time allotted if needed, okay? So, Mr. Porter, you're the first person on the list beneath Ms. Hutchins, so I'm going to let you speak first as an interested party. So if you would please, when you come up, state your name and just make your conversation or your piece.
Dave Porter, 121 Falcon Bluff. So I'm we're at this property, and there's actually a house across the road right here, so there is no oil field access this way. And the Farmington Electric has actually now put a fence across right here, so there is no access from the main highway this way. So you go Pepsi Way down and then to this road to get to that site.
Okay.
Right. So they can't, no oil field equipment has gone through this neighborhood in like 20 years.
Okay.
So that's not a problem. The thing that we are concerned with is how long the drilling was going to take. You just said 1 day only is going to take to work over the whole road. And that's one thing.
Yes, he can cross-examine you, so go. Yes, please.
Yeah, so it will take a few days to set up all the equipment. The rig will actually be up and operational for 1 day, and then they'll be taking it down and moving the equipment off.
So not like overnight, just during work hours?
No, and we're very sensitive to the fact that there are people in the residential area. We're going to be using hospital-grade mufflers on all equipment. We're keeping our decibels down to, it says in the application, I'll grab it if you're interested. We're keeping it down to very, very low levels, and we'll only be doing any sort of activity from normal business hours, like 8 to 5. Mm-hmm. We're trying to be very sensitive to the fact that it is in the city limits and it is in close proximity to other people.
Because there are, these people own horses, and these people own horses, and most people are pet owners, and that's what I was concerned about was the noise from that and any lighting at night. But if you're not going to operate at night, that's really good. And I thank you for your concern as a company about that, so you guys are doing a good job. Otherwise, this one is fenced. And that's one that's not, it actually blends in pretty decently. So, because the last time that they did this one, when Concord Phillips had it, they made noise like crazy. And it freaked out the horses and things, and that's mainly what we were concerned about as residents there, is the noise and lighting issue when the drilling and setup is going, just because there's horses, and I mean, they've had horses, other people in my neighborhood have had horses spooked so bad that they've jumped the fence and went out on the roads and caused traffic problems, and that's what I'm concerned about, or we're concerned about as a residential area. So as long as everything is mitigated, then and not going to last more than just a couple of days, then that's not as much of a problem. But, that's most of what I have to say. Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Anybody have any questions of Mr. Porter or any comments? Okay. Thank you, sir. Are you comfortable, Mr. Porter?
As long as they've got it way down and I can do the lights at night, I think we're fine.
And according to the staff summary, they're going to operate during basically normal business hours.
You can see that in the letter that we got.
Right. No, that's okay. Yeah, and that's why we have these conversations. But yes, the intent and the plan is to operate during normal business hours according to the staff summary, and to for that very reason, to keep the lights and the noise for folks that are getting up to work and all that. Okay. So with that said, Mrs. Eagle, when you come up, please state your name and your address for the record, please.
I'm Lorna Eagle, and we live at 200 Bison Trail. Our home's within 400 feet of the well site. Our concerns were the same as the Porters. We're very happy to see the increase in the oil and gas, and are very supportive of that. I think all of our concerns have been addressed tonight, especially the noise and the light. And so I really don't have any other questions.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And there are no other parties or interested persons listed under this particular land use hearing. So at this time, I will close this particular hearing for 18-03 to testimony and open it up to discussion amongst the City Commission.
I think we should approve it with conditions, and those conditions include screening the area, because it is close to a residential area, and there are already other wells out there that have been screened. He showed us one that close by that had been screened, so that would be my thoughts on it, to approve with the conditions and finding the facts.
Greening and no landscaping, because it's got natural landscaping, is that what you're thinking?
Well, the screening.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but not requiring any additional, if they're going to screen it, then there's not really a
Yeah, I
need for
don't
any
think so.
additional landscaping, I don't think.
Just the screening.
Commissioner Lewis, any input?
Like what Mr. Fryan said.
Okay. I feel like I'm the lone voice here, but that's why we do these things. And it just happens to be this particular land use hearing. It's not. I don't have any axes to grind with anybody in particular, but we talk all the time in our economic development meetings. When we run for office, when we have these elections, we all talk about diversifying our economy and moving away for what is going to be the inevitable, I guess kind of where we run out of gas from these particular wells and these particular sites, to where we're already kind of looking for another seam, so to speak, that's a little bit higher up. And because I guess I'm especially sensitive to it because they're in the city limits. And I feel like this, if we're going to start looking at our future as we move away from oil and gas dependency, and we all talk about it, and that's kind of all as it feels like as we ever do is kind of talk about it. And I worry that we're a little gun shy to actually put some action behind our words that we always, in our groups, at our kitchen tables, we talk when we run for office. Like I said, we talk about these things, And I don't feel like, in many cases, and maybe this isn't the one to do it on, but I feel like in many cases, that's all it ends up being. And then we just kind of fall in line when we're faced with a decision to affect some sort of change. And I personally, I made commitments to people that supported me when I ran for this, and I feel like some of these wells, as Ms. Hutchins was, and I'm not trying to use words against her because it's kind of, you're just trying to search for words. They are what is considered kind of a junk well. And I don't know. I'm just asking the question, I guess. Is this really one of those things that we want to continue to just try and wring every drop out? Or maybe start to transition away from it?
Comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, please.
These wells are already there. We're not approving drilling a new well.
Very good point.
And so I have the same commitment to the future of solar and sustainable energy and so forth. I'm wondering if Hillcorp is looking into adding that to what they do as far as getting into sustainable energies and looking at solar, because this will play out someday. Is that any part of their
We can't.
business?
We've closed
I'm
that,
sorry. I'm sorry.
Close.
But
I made
yeah.
that mistake last time. So I don't know.
So anyway, I feel like these are established wells, and from what we've heard, that is to improve the efficiency of the wells, and this is still an oil and gas area that is beneficial to us, and that's so much of why we're here, and hopefully we can move into the future of solar and wind.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I wholeheartedly agree with what both of you said. I'm a big believer in renewable energy and transitioning to that, but we're not quite there yet. And we have to have something to fill the gap until such time as we can transition. And this is, for lack of a better term, a painless way of doing that. We're using existing wells and breathing a little bit of new life into them and improving production and revenues therein for us and for Hillcorp. So I think this will give us the breathing room, if nothing else, to help us plan for that transition a little better. We've all heard about the problems that have gone on with the closure of the mines. Well, I'll get slapped in the face. Well, this is kind of like an easier transition for me to do. This is something we can plan on for the future and then still transition into something a little different. That's how I'm looking at it.
Mr. Mayor, I think the same. I think we are looking at we are talking about diversifying, and we're all talking about it. But it does take time to do that. It takes time. It takes money to do those things. And so, in my opinion, yes, we still need to look at other revenues to bring in to the state and to our city. But at the same time, I think by reworking these wells, that we are also utilizing a resource that we have available to us right now. So, like you said, to get through, and oil and gas is a huge, and it always has been a huge part of this community and the state. But we all know that we're having to diversify. So I feel like it's by using the same well pad and then I think that we're being, that's a responsible way to look at it. Not to say that new drilling might not be an option too, as far as I'm concerned, but I just think, it's not going to happen, nothing's going to happen overnight. So.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody's point of view and your input, and it does help, which I said a million times tonight. This is why we have these conversations, because, all good points. Does anybody have anything else they would like to add? Because there are no other folks, no other interested parties or witnesses for this particular land use hearing. So with that, hearing none, I will close this to discussion and entertain a motion for OG 818-03.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve OG 18-03, an oil and gas well application submitted by Carrie Hutchins on behalf of Hillcore San Juan LP for permission to modify an existing well at the location indicated per the staff report with recommended conditions and suggested findings of facts, with the addition of screening this well pad. Is that what we, did that
Yes,
cover it?
I believe that covered it.
Yeah, within the conditions.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Smoker,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fry,
Aye.
Commissioner Sykes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
motion passes. Order.
Okay. Next is item C, OG 18-04, Hillcorp Incorporated Jail Site Permit, Glen Swire, number 1, southeast southwest of Section 8. Mr. Saavedra.
City Commission, this is a application by Hillcorp, represented again by Carrie Hutchinson, for modification of a well. Seen here, it is near Western and Swire. It's actually on City of Aztec property. Access is Swire/Western, that occurs right there. It is within close proximity of residential dwelling units, just over 50 feet from the wellhead to the nearest residential unit. Now, this is an existing well site, and I'm sure the applicant, Carrie Hutchinson, can correct me at the time, but I believe the well was developed and in place before the residential units, at least from my understanding. That said, if this was a new well site, community development would be very uncomfortable approving such wells, gas head within close proximity of residential units for obvious reasons, safety being one of them. Nevertheless, it is an existing well site. This was the application requirements, and in red was what was not submitted. Again, we went through the same things. Now, the only difference with this one is the area. And again, that's why we bring them to you for City Commission. What makes this well site different from other well sites? Well, this one is in close proximity to residential dwelling units. This is a picture submitted by an individual within the area. As you can see, it's right here. And this is their fence right there. So they shared this because they had some concerns about it. Now, what's a little different about this well site, what I didn't notice about others, is the smell of gas. And we heard a complaint about that. Apparently, it is stronger on certain days as opposed to other days. To verify, went out there. I did notice it. That is a concern, and I'm hoping the applicant can speak to that, and hopefully there can be some mitigation measures to that, because health, safety, and general welfare are the principles of community development, and we want to make sure all those are adhered to. Again, I think this is a better picture. Fence line, well side. As you can see, there is no screening. There is no vegetation within the pad. The only vegetation that occurs is outside of the area. This is what's known as Townsend. The solar array is right there. The fence is right here. Another concern we have with this site in particular is safety. There is a cabinet or a shed right here that was open. It was not locked, and hopefully that can be addressed, not just with this one, but for all of them, that the screening, the landscaping, and the safety elements, I think it's in the best interest of the city that it is secure, and that not only for the applicant, but actually for the city by and large. So I'd be happy to share those pictures with you as well, just getting late. So we just want to make sure that if there is that issue, that it be addressed. We are hesitant in terms of recommending approval based on the close proximity, But again, this well has been in existence for decades. The applicant has already indicated what they're planning to do. What we are asking for is screening, landscaping for the residential unit, the apron right here, because this has been an issue, especially there is no gravel right now right here whatsoever. So we're asking for that as well, as long as, in addition to the concrete apron. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Saavedra, I noticed that in the staff summary, and initially you talked about being next to the wildlife refuge. Is there any impact to that refuge?
In regards to
I mean,
safety?
Safety or any kind of...
You know, that's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't know and wouldn't be able to give you that answer. It is in close proximity to a floodplain. A floodplain is within this area. The animus is right here. Will it impact our water table? Couldn't tell you. So unfortunately, I don't know. The applicant is required to follow guidelines by the state, by the federal government. But unfortunately, I just cannot give you that answer right now.
Mr. Saavedra, when you first opened up your portion of the hearing, you had said that if this were a new well, and this didn't already exist, that you would not recommend it for approval.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes. Oil and gas is very specific. Residential units have to be, there has to be a distance, a setback, and that is 400 feet. This by no means meets that. So that's why it would not meet current standards right now without a variance. And that's why it's not to say that it wouldn't be approved by City Commission, but that variance would have to go with it. Again, this is an existing well.
So it's grandfathered in?
Yeah, I'd say that's, is it, yeah,
obviously, it's there.
It's there.
It's operating, and there's homes
Yeah.
within 50 feet of it. So, but, and maybe some folks, maybe you can fill me in a little bit, or some of the folks on the commission as we get to discussion. So if so, tell me, we can cover it in discussion and I'll move on. But approximately when was this residential area put in this close of proximity to a well site?
It was in the 60s.
In the 60s. So I guess I just have to go on good faith that there weren't the same regulations
No.
in the 60s that there are now. Obviously, I think you could say that about just about everything.
The regulations that we have today were adopted in 2007. That doesn't mean that prior there wasn't some type of regulations.
And those are state regulations?
No, these are City of Aztec regulations.
Okay.
So this is specific to the City of Aztec. The county, different cities have different regulations and different requirements and different conditions for that matter.
Okay.
So just to why we ask for some of these conditions, I'll give you an example. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's probably not relevant, but hopefully this will kind of clarify some of the conditions and what we asked for. So I believe it was Pecos wanted to ban oil wells, and they ended up getting sued for that. State law says you can't, okay? And I'm not an attorney, and the city attorney could better speak to that. Actually, sorry, it wasn't Pecos, it was Mora. Now, what Santa Fe did was put specific conditions, such as if you build a new fracking well, or you're going to frack, you have to build us a school in response. Okay. So they didn't ban it outright, but they made it extremely difficult. Our regulations are not like that by any means. As you can see, we're asking for screening and landscaping and so
Right.
forth. We live in a different community. There's a different economy here and so forth. So oil and gas, for better or for worse, is a driver of our economy. What we, as community development, look for is that harmony so that they can coexist to some extent. Where we are concerned, to answer your question about regulations, we wouldn't suggest because of obvious safety reasons. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't propose something like better screening, a wall, something of that nature to mitigate some of those safety concerns. That's within your purview. Again, this is staff's recommendations. You don't have to go with any of them at all, but this is what we see best fit for this given site based on this current location.
May I say something?
Please.
Okay, so when I look at section 1533 of the code, under additional requirements, it does say, in addition, at any time that an existing well site is not in compliance with the regulations set forth herein, the owner of the well shall be required to demonstrate compliance. So to me, that does give some wiggle room possibly for looking at an older well and saying it's not in compliance, but without doing more research in situations where the development happened after the well. I would want to look closely at that. If that is something, you know, if the reason you struggle to approve this is the 400 feet, the well did exist first, and I have read through the ordinances to see if anything speaks to that. It doesn't, so I would want to do, you know, more research. But I do think that that section does give you some wiggle room for a potential issue with the fact that it doesn't meet the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that comment, but by the same token, the well was there
right
at least 20, 30 years before the subdivision was, so I'm wondering if there isn't some kind of a grandfathered thing that you haven't seen yet.
And that's why
I'm not questioning your legal.
Oh, no, I am not at all.
But that's the whole, you know, I mean, we see this over and over and over. We've heard the same thing about the the Aztec speedways. They've been there since the 50s, but then people move in and then they gripe about you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or,
so that's
or
why
build next to a well location. So I'm just saying, I think that would be pretty thin, for me, it would be pretty thin ground to.
Okay.
Anyway,
well, and we can kind of revisit this when we do our panel discussion, I think, on that, as far as those concerns.
And I just wanted, well, I guess I can ask Carrie when, Ms. Hutchins, when she comes up about the
Okay.
shed that he was talking about.
Sure. Okay.
I think it's a well house. I think it's a well house. It's not a shed, it's a well house.
Okay.
Yeah, it was open, there was a lock, but the lock is broken off. I can pull it up on my email, I just got it.
No, I mean, you go out.
And maybe it's not a concern, it just.
They're open all over.
If I had a well house, I probably would.
I got you.
And there was a lock, I'd probably want to look into that.
Okay. Well, and yes, please don't let me forget, or when we bring that up, we'll address that.
Thank you.
So if nobody has any other questions for Mr. Saavedra, I'm going to move on to our applicant, Ms. Hutchins, once again.
Right, hello again. I have some pictures of this one too, if you want to take one and pass it down, just to help further describe the site. So just to knock out that little so that our well location, as you can see in the pictures that are coming around, is completely surrounded by fence with 3-strand barbed wire on top of that. So it's very, very secure. It is in the city and there are presumably children around. So our well site is bounded by a fence, which you can see in the aerial. The shed spoken of is on a completely different property, way outside of the fence. It has nothing to do with our operation. I think it's probably associated with Enterprise and Williams, whoever the gas gathering company is. I'm guessing it's a meter run. I don't know for sure. I know without a doubt it has nothing to do with our operation. It's not run by us. It's very far from our well site. Everything that we use to operate the well is enclosed within the fenced area, which is locked and is very secure, as you can see in the photos. We have no issue with putting some gravel in the entrance to that. That's no problem at all. As you can see in the photos, there is already a pretty good visual screen from the encroaching residences. And so that's fine. It is tight, as Mr. Saavedra pointed out, it's very tight. These residences were permitted to be built very close to the well. And this well was drilled in 1961. So definitely predates the subdivision. That's obviously not ideal, but we can't pick the well bore up and move it. And I do think it's important just to mention, and I don't want to get into a long philosophical oil and gas conversation, but these oil and gas lease rights are property rights just like any other property right. And I think that that's just important to remember for context, is this is something that was purchased just as you would purchase a surface property or a water right. So and this is something that's existed for a long time. The oil and gas lease is in the plan. I don't know when that was signed. Let's see. 52. So this is something that has been around for a long time, this lease, and this well's been producing for that period. One thing that's not reflected in the application, because Mr. Saavedra and I talked about it, we decided an email would be a better way to describe this than putting it in the application, is Hillport is requesting, since this is City of Aztec property, use of some of the adjacent property for one day to stage equipment. It will not be any fluids or anything like that. And so the part that we're looking at, I'll use the map again, is to use the city's access road to their facility here. They have a main entrance over here, and so we're just asking to use the backup entrance just alongside the well, just to stage some equipment for the day. And then we probably won't need it, but just on the other side of the fence, there's just kind of a pile of trash there. And we'd be welcome, we'd offer to haul that trash out if the city's willing to let us use that area just for one day. And that's also in the application under site plan. You can see the area where requested for temporary use, it's highlighted in green. And I can circulate my copy if that would be more convenient for the commission. And then as far as visual screening for future development, I know that there is some excitement with the city to maybe do something surrounding the Highland Games with kind of some of that area down there. Is this the right site? We think that's an awesome idea. I love seeing new parks in the city of Aztec. We'd be happy to comply. If that is something that the city is interested in, I guess I would ask that perhaps there could be a trigger in our permit, so that if that was approved and if funding went through and if construction started on that park for the city, then at that point we could come in and landscape. That way we aren't doing it in hopes of something that may never happen. We're doing it tied with actual development and actual building of a park. But yeah, if there's a park there, we're happy to help, and like I said, we're happy to gravel. I think there already is a visual screen from the residences. It's very secure. The gas odor. We can confirm with 100% certainty there's no leak on this well. I was there today, and I was there twice in the last 6 weeks, and I haven't smelt it, but as Mr. Saavedra says, it seems to kind of come and go. We think that it's coming from a produced water tank. So oftentimes with the production of oil and gas, some water is produced up, and this is like fossil water that's locked in that formation. And so sometimes when that comes up, it has some oil and gas odors. It might have traces of hydrocarbons. We keep those in separate tanks, and then we haul them off and dispose of them according to our oil and gas regulations. And so sometimes that water emits a little bit of an odor, and that's what we think it's coming from, because that's not uncommon. But we've never had any complaints personally about it. We'll definitely look into it, but we can confirm there's no leaks. We've been out there, we've looked at it, we think it's coming from the water pit. And I think there was some concern about water issues, floodplain issues. I don't know if the commission shares this concern, but I'm happy to talk about that if that's of interest.
It's been there, I don't need any more, I don't think, than what, because it's already been there for so long. I don't think I have any other questions about the floodplain thing.
Well, I
But
mean,
you might,
I don't know that that's necessarily an adequate response personally, because, you know, maybe my house is never flooded until it does.
No,
you know,
that's not what I meant.
And then I'm really concerned, you know,
That's
because
not what I meant.
of the damage it does to my home, my property, et cetera. And hopefully, you know, obviously nobody wishes for any kind of catastrophe or damage or anything. But what is because we are having, weather issues that, you know, the supposed 100-year flood that happens every 4th or 5th year, it's not really a 100-year flood anymore. So, and we have to stop chalking these things up to happenstance. So my question, I guess, and then I'll allow Mr. Saavedra to chime in on this, is what is the I guess the policy or the procedure or the plan, because it is in close proximity to a floodplain.
Right. Well, I mean, we live in an arid environment. When it rains, and we are all very accustomed to flash floods. Our locations sometimes flood. We don't typically have spills or any sort of environmental discharges or any environmental issues associated with that. It'd have to be pretty serious. These are constructed to, withstand all that. We don't have any open fluids on this site. We don't have open pits that could overflow with rainwater or something like that.
Right.
As far as depth to water table, because that's a question I get a lot. This particular well is completed in the Dakota at over 6,000 feet deep. And I haven't pulled any domestic water wells in this area, but they are very shallow, I am sure. Many of them are probably 20 to 100 feet deep. I cannot imagine one's deeper than 100 in this area. So the difference between the water table, the freshwater aquifer that we withdraw water from and that recharges the river is very different from where we're producing from. So I think that's just important to adjust perspective, that we're talking about several thousand feet different and various impermeable layers in between. So we consider the aquifer to be very, very safe from this well and others.
So another quick question. This well has been fracked in the past, correct? Now,
I don't have a frack. I don't.
Because the plan is to frack it.
So for
complete.
I mean, like I said, I feel like that's not a term that's used very precisely, and definitely is not typically used the way we're used to hearing it in this context. When you hear the word fracking, we're typically talking about these long horizontal laterals that new wells are going through, which is a very different thing than what we do on these kind of more, as I've said, older vertical wells. But yes, similar fluid constituents are used, similar pressures are used, but on such a small scale. So it's just to perforate the casing and just to recomplete it in that new formation, but it's not a big horizontal thing where we're...
No, and I'm not suggesting that. My question, I guess, and where I was kind of maybe trying to get some information or some education on this is, so we do that, and this is, again, an elementary question, and I apologize. I have no background in oil and gas, so this is a great learning experience for me. But I do have concerns, but so this well has been in existence since, 1961 or something like that? And using the current technology that we're going to use, or that you propose to use to recomplete this well, how often does that happen? So when you frack a well, or whatever term, we'll just use it because that's the layman's term I'm familiar with, it happens the one time, basically, and then you draw whatever seam you kind of split open?
I think so.
And
I'm an attorney.
No, I understand.
I'm not out there, I'm not a field person, and I'm not an engineer, but my impression is the same. I can definitely tell you without a doubt, this is not that fracking a well is something, when you're entering a new formation, it's not something that's done periodically for maintenance or something.
So here's kind of where I'm going with this question. This well was in place back in 1961. There were no homes there at the time. But now there are, for whatever reason. And I'm not here to debate. Personally, I'm not really interested in debating whether they should be there or whether they shouldn't be there. They are there. And we are looking at potentially approving what you're splitting open the rock in very close proximity to dozens of homes that weren't there before when that well was initially drilled and tapped into. And that's why I was asking if that was something that has been ongoing and there's been no problems, or now that this new, more efficient technology is being employed in an older well that has never had this done before, with dozens of homes literally within a baseball's throw of it, with children, with our water, our river right close by. It may be legal, but is it right to consider, you know what I'm saying? I guess that's the question I'm curious about.
Yeah, no, I hear your question. I think that as the mayor of Aztec, that's an excellent question to pose. I mean, that's something that is very much within your purview as mayor, to protect the citizens around you, and I'm sure everyone in the room appreciates that you pose it. I think that the really important thing to keep in mind is, while this is in close proximity on the surface to these houses, it's something that's happening 6,000 feet underground, which is...
Well, currently, right? So the well is drilled currently at approximately...
Slightly higher, but let me see, that top will be... So it looks like the.
3,160 feet.
I think it's going to be at
Or my-
5598.
Load hole fluid runs. And-
36.
Yeah. Right. 3160 or something like that, or? Oh, 3660, the top perforation, is that what we're referring to?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Yep. So,
And the
again,
bottom at 4,500.
that's a significant depth, and that's where everything's going to be happening. From the surface, I guess I would say, to reframe it slightly, I understand your concern, but this is less of a surface impact than what it appears, and it's more of a very deep geologic impact.
And again, I'm not a geologist either.
And just to answer your
but-
question, I guess more directly, the other piece is we have had zero safety incidents with this. We've had zero issues with anything like this. This is not something that's Hillcorp just invented recently.
No, I understand.
This is something that is routinely done in and around cities, in and around residences. The technology keeps getting better and better and safer. And yeah, this is something that happens to a much larger scale in nearby proximity residences as well without incident. So I feel comfortable with the safety. My engineers feel comfortable with the safety. I guess that's my best way to respond.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Hutchins?
I do have one, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there anything that you guys can do to help mitigate the smell for the residents that are there, even though you know it's not a leak, and so there's not that safety thing, but the smell, if it's that bad, then is there something that you guys have talked about that you could do?
Yeah, we're talking about just different ways to manage the water, because we do think that that's it. And so, we're still kind of jostling around with different ideas. I'm looking at Michael, he's my engineer on the project, and he's working on it as we speak, actually. So
Okay.
we'll find a better way to handle this. Like I said, we didn't know it was an issue. It is very intermittent, but intermittent or no, if it's happening at all, it's something that should be mitigated. So-
Right, if it's something that those residents are having to deal with.
Exactly, and we're definitely committed to fixing that. And if I may,
Appreciate
talk just for a second about noise, just because it is so tight in here. So we have a few additional measures, and these are all in your application, to help mitigate noise. Like I said, it's going to be one day that there's going to be a lot of noise, like more than normal. But to work on that, all motorized equipment's going to be vented away from the residences. It's going to be equipped with hospital-grade mufflers for a 25 decibel noise reduction. We'll adhere very strictly to a sound management plan, so all operations will occur between 8 and 5. And then we're also going to be very specific with what day this work's going to happen and send out another letter to all the landowners within 400 feet and let them know exactly what day this is happening, exactly what hours, so that they can make any additional measures that they need to, say, they need a quiet place to work during the day, or they have a young baby at home, that might be a good day to spend at grandma's, things like that, just so that the people that live in the vicinity can adjust as they need to, if they think that's going to be an issue. And like I said, we'll do everything we can to keep it as low as possible with all the measures outlined, but just to give people just a little bit more communication, a little bit more opportunity to make adjustments as needed.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little confused about the mention of a park and that you would help with. I'm not aware.
Mr. Svedra said something about potential development to the south.
On Swire?
The Townsend property.
Okay.
And I was just saying that if the commission thinks that landscaping would be appropriate, that we would just ask that perhaps that be triggered by construction of the park, so that both of those enterprises are happening together.
I think what Carrie is suggesting is they're going to build us that park.
Well, that's kind of what I was hoping, and then we can put a plaque up with your name on it, and, yeah, okay. Sounds good.
He's good.
Bill under suggestion of Carrie Hutchins, formerly of Hillcorp.
Right.
And my biggest concern about this whole thing is being so close to that neighborhood, and if some other kind of fence would help for security or what. I'm just, have you ever been in a situation in another community where you built a different type, a stronger fence, a block fence, or something of this type to separate the well, or a higher fence so that the neighborhood would be, more or less separated from the well?
So I think from a security standpoint, this fence is pretty good. You can see from the pictures, it's very heavy. It's a heavy wire fence, and it also has the barbed wire on the top, so it's very, very tall. So I think from a security standpoint, this is pretty top-notch. There are lots of different types of fence, so for other reasons, perhaps, maybe another fence, but, I mean, there's already a really strong visual mitigation fence from the back of the properties, and then it's very secure. So I think the fencing is appropriate on this one. As you can see from the photos, no one else sees it. It really is. It's at the end of a road and a turnout. So perhaps some city employees, when they use the back entrance, they might see it, but no one else is down here. So I think the fencing is pretty solid on this one for all different purposes.
Okay. Is there anybody else that has any other questions or comments or cross-examination of our applicant? Okay. No. Hearing none, I would like to open it up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Badger.
So to answer Mr. Fry about the park, what that is about is Townsend Park development that is going to occur down there. City staff has submitted applications in the past for grants, so we could build anything from a trail to a Spartan course, things of that nature. Carrie correctly pointed out in terms of the trigger, perhaps when we build that they would go in and do some landscaping. I would just want to clarify where that landscaping would occur. Would that be primarily just the well site, or?
Well, I mean, you guys are the bosses, but I would think that since there's already a visual screen next to the residences on the north, and the property to the west is just the city's yard, and then the entrance is to the east. So I would limit the landscaping to the south side, which would face the park. Depending on how the park is accessed, if it's accessed through that main route, then maybe it would also be appropriate on the east side. But I don't think it would be necessary or appropriate on the north side or the west side.
Now, a few other things to also clarify as well. This is not in the floodplain. The floodplain is further south. That doesn't mean that it will not flood here or anything of that nature.
Right.
But one thing that we have to be concerned about that was not in the staff report and was not part of the application is what's the drainage plan for this? And that's more or less called a storm drainage plan. So when it rains, if you have heavy equipment, and this is not just picking on oil and gas, this is any type of construction. You have a rig, a tractor. If it rains, water goes through those machines. What does that do to the water table, the arroyos, the ditches, and so forth? So, for example, this area, if you walk out there, slopes down. And you can see right here, you've got a water channel right there, an arroyo. So that's something to keep in mind if there is concerns about the floodplain. Well, it is out of the floodplain, but it is potentially still impacting stormwater. So just wanted to clarify that just a bit. Where we talked about if there is going to be staff recommended landscaping and screening as part of this as a condition, staff would want to know to what extent, what just clarification, if that is going to be a recommendation or a condition for this, what that is, what that consists of, where it is it trees and so forth, plants, so we have a good idea, the applicant has a good idea. Part of the concern about screening and landscaping was the close proximity to the houses. Correct? Carrie is correct that the neighbors have screened it, so they've done it on their behalf. As you can see, there's no trees. Again, will it help? I believe so, a staff opinion. Could it end up being like that someday? We're confident that it could. It's not going to make the issue go away in terms of proximity. It's just a mitigation measure. To get into a block wall, that might be one of those things where if there is concerns about safety and proximity, a block wall if thick enough, can serve as a firewall. That happens a lot of times in buildings as well, in construction standards. That might be a way to kind of thread that needle, if appropriate, near the residential side. And then lastly, by no means, this is an application with conditions. If there is questions, if there's concerns, staff does encourage you to take your time and make a good informed decision. And if that means table it, even I know that would be frustrating for the applicant and some other individuals, you have that option available. So I just wanted to let you know that your options are, approve, deny, approve with conditions, or table it. So, please.
I've got a question. Well, that's helpful to think about, because when you say to provide the details of landscaping, we're not landscapers. So, how do we even begin to talk about how many trees per foot? And that just is a little overwhelming to me here tonight. Sure. To think about.
And we could give you our standard 1 tree per 500. I don't know if that is appropriate for the given application, the site, but it is something that we're throwing out there. If trees you feel are necessary, this is up to commission. If plants, probably if you're gonna have a plant that's 2 feet high, I don't know what that's gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
A tree like this, bushes, natural vegetation, natural bushes like this, will help mitigate the appearance issue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you are gonna do landscaping, you also have to think about who's gonna water to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
So some areas like by A&W, because you see the natural vegetation, because there's cattails, we know that there's water in close proximity, it's not going to be too much of an issue, so as long as you plant appropriate plants. This one has survived. There's drought-tolerant plants that are appropriate, so, those are, we can get into the details of landscaping all night long.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to clarify, if there is conditions, what they are, where they are, and at what time. Staff still recommends at the time of the application, so I understand triggering maybe a good suggestion at the time of park, but we're also looking at the residents. So as city planners, again, we have to walk in individual shoes. And if I'm walking in some of the residential dwelling units, what would I want as a community? What would I want as a neighborhood? And then at the same time, we have to walk in the applicant's shoes as well. Does this make sense? It's been here for so many years. So that's all stuff to further complicate the smooth hearing. So I'm going to sit down now.
Okay.
I need to make just one quick comment. I won't belabor it, but if we can go back to the aerial of the well. So we have, we're regulated by numerous state agencies, and we have requirements of what we can do too. And I know a lot of the discussion has been about screening for the residences, but because our well perimeter on the north side abuts their backyards, we can't have any landscaping inside that fence because it poses fire danger. Mm-hmm. And so, just to make it clear, if the commission's thinking about landscaping, there wouldn't be the option to put it between the well and the residences. It's an impossibility based on the physical layout. On the outside, anywhere outside of the fence, in theory, we could do it. So just to clarify, that I don't think that any sort of landscaping could mitigate this from the resident's perspective because of the way the site's laid out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any other further questions for Ms. Hutchins? Excuse me. All right, so we have 3 folks that have signed up as interested parties. First is Mrs. Blackburn. Hello.
My name is Myra Blackburn, and my address is 506 Western Drive. And do you mind putting that picture up? The
pointer's right there.
Oh, how do I get to the picture of our backyard? Oh, right there. So you can see this is from our backyard. And that's looking right out our back porch. So you can see that the tank is right there. And as far as the fence, I think the fence is secure, but it does kind of look, like a prison fence because it has like razor wire on the top. So it's not that aesthetic. But let me just go back. My husband purchased this property in 2001, and at that time, there was just a little capped, you couldn't even see where the well was. It was just a little capped pipe in the ground. So it wasn't something at that time that he even thought about because the well wasn't active and nothing was going on with it. It wasn't even a concern. And I think that was maybe the second home he'd bought, and so he didn't even think about that being an issue in the future. So that answers the question, well, you knew the well was there, why did you buy the property? Well, it wasn't active, and it was, I guess in the future, when we buy a house, we'll make sure that there's nothing around. But that was the situation when he bought the house. And gradually, over the years that Jeff lived there before we got married, there was no tank. There was only the only above ground feature, like I said, was a small pipe with a cap. But since about 2004, the site has grown exponentially. With the tank going up, and the compressor, and the industrial fencing that you can see. So, but after I moved in, I noticed that, especially in the summertime, just some really offensive smells that we talked about already. But the thing that I didn't like was when the swamp cooler would come on in the evenings, and it was periodically, it was very sporadically, but the swamp cooler would just pull the stink in the house, and then I noticed my eyes were burning. Both of us had burning eyes several times, and that was concerning to me because that went beyond just smelling bad. It was burning. And a lot of times the smell would come in the middle of the night, so it would wake you up and disturb sleep, so I didn't like that. And the other thing that everybody's already mentioned is that this well it's exactly 115, exactly, but we measured it, and it's 115 feet from our back door. So that's closer than any of the other well sites that were discussed tonight. And I've lived around the oil and gas industry my entire life. I grew up in Texas. So I don't have any problem with anybody's ability to make a living. But most of those wells are far enough away where it doesn't immediately impact your senses. And the other thing that I did in preparation for this meeting was I started just looking at articles about health concerns for people that live in proximity to wells, and a huge amount of information is out there. And what I focused on, I didn't just look at newspaper articles, I looked at scholarly peer-reviewed articles from major universities. And I found a lot. And one that was published just in 2018 from Colorado University, and they found that, and they were just looking at wells that were within 500 feet, oil and gas wells. And they don't even look at, because in Colorado I think it might be 500 feet that wells have to be from residences. But they found that the health risks for cancer and neurological conditions are statistically significantly greater when within 500 feet of wells. So that was, and frankly, I just got kind of overwhelmed because there was so many different articles. And of course, I know legally that Hillcorp is within their right to do. They do own the property, but there was another study that from the University of Maryland recently that recommended 2,000 feet away from any well for homes and schools because for kids kids are even more sensitive to chemicals than adults are. But I'm worried about the impact that it has on our resale value of our property, and because it is so close, and the fence. It is a sturdy fence, but it's definitely not aesthetic. And if it's not possible to just deny the permit, if it was my decision, and I know Hillcorp has a lot of other wells that are further away from homes, and I would appeal to Hillcorp's sense of empathy and humanity if you live this close and saw some of the research out there. I would really appreciate the consideration on this. But if it's at all possible for that well to just be capped, I would love that. But I know that in our country, people that have financial interests score very high on the ballot, and I understand that. So one thing about this fence, if it's possible to mitigate that with something that's more, even if it's on our property partially, to make a fence that's higher, that's not, that would completely or almost completely block the tank, that would be awesome. But like I said, I would rather it just go away, but I know that what I want and what happens is not necessarily what's going to happen. But I just wanted to show you my concerns, and I know there's some other people that want to talk. So thank you. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. The next person that signed up is Seth Harris. Mr. Harris. And I think Mr. Burkett has left the building. So we have Mr. Harris is the only other party.
Can you go back to the overhead view? Okay, let me see here. Okay, 506, her house is right here. My house, 502, is right here. This is the wellhead right here, which I could probably literally stick a broomstick through the fence and touch the wellhead, almost. It's surrounded by metal barricades and everything, so you can't back a truck into it or whatever. But I believe, okay, so this is my kitchen window, and it points straight at that tank. Next to the tank, you have this vent that comes straight out, and I've seen gas just pour out of that vent. You can see it rippling in the air. I don't know if it's overflow or what, but I've seen it. I've been afraid to barbecue in my backyard. And yeah, the gas will come through your air conditioner, and it'll give you a headache. It makes your eyes burn. It's bad. It can get really bad. It's not all the time, but when it's venting, it can be, you just want to open all the windows and doors, but it doesn't do anything because it's just pouring in your house. So you close everything up, shut everything off. I don't know why it's venting out that much. That's something that probably needs to be looked at, especially being that close. I haven't seen that type of vent on a lot of different wells, but I guess is this an LP gas well? I'm not sure what this well is for or what they're pumping out of it, but there's just a separator and that vent and a tank on this site, and then a wellhead. I moved into that house in late 2006, and I don't think that it was ran for at least 5 years. Didn't have any problems with it at all. And then I saw some guys out there working on it, and that's when I started seeing it venting and smelling. The smell's really bad. I haven't smelt it a lot lately, but I've been at work a lot, so I'm not home during the day a lot. I'm sure it's still doing it. As far as the fencing goes, that's my view. I can see from my kitchen window over my privacy fence, through chain link fence, through the tank, through another chain link fence, to a really gorgeous valley that's nothing but trees. There's rivers down there. I can see the river. I used to be able to see the river a little bit before I put my fence up. But you can kind of look past all that metal and everything, and you can see the valley down there. It's really nice in the summertime. So I wouldn't really appreciate panel fencing around it, because then it would just be a green wall, or, you know, whatever color, tan wall. Landscaping might be nice, but I would kind of vote against any kind of paneling around it. If they do a park down here, you know, I don't know, it probably wouldn't be very nice to look at that, to look at that well site there, but, another thing though, the fences are privacy fences, and the fence that is up on the location right now, if you're standing in between the fences, you can touch both fences about like that. And then all the weeds grow from, all the tumbleweeds grow from this lot over here and below in between the fences, and it's nothing but weeds between the two fences back there all the time. So I don't know if they need to maybe look into putting some, if they're worried about fire hazards. That's a major fire hazard, I would think. Before I put my privacy fence up, I used to take care of that area up to the metal fencing. But now I don't have any access back there unless I walk all the way around the block. And then I'm not going to go, you know, de-weed somebody else's property. You know, it's not my stuff. But that might need to be looked at. I wouldn't mind them revamping the well, but if there's got to be some other technology out there where they can vent it in a different way, or if they're pulling gas out of this well, why are we venting so much gas out of the well? We should be using that gas. I don't, you know, this is just questions I have. That's really all I have. The other gentleman that was here earlier, Berkeley.
Okay.
Burkett, he actually is my neighbor over here on this side. He lives right there. So he can, it just barely covers his back in his property there, but I'm sure he can have something to say about it. He's pretty mouthy. One more thing. This is the street, Western Drive. They just redid the new sewer line down that street. So that is brand new asphalt, brand new sidewalks. It's been regraded. We went through 2 years of them excavating that entire street. It's all brand new right now, and this is all clay. And it's very, very deep, sticky clay back behind here. So some gravel and you know, maybe a concrete skirt entering that road, because I know before when trucks would go back on that road and come up on the highway, come up on the street, there was, you know, mud clouds when it ever rained. Yeah, and it turns into a big mud pit right at that gate. It's just a huge mud pit. Irrigation ditch that runs right here, and it drops probably about 15 feet. You can't really tell, but this all slopes down, and then right here it drops about 15 feet. And then the river is just past the picture, right down on the corner.
Okay.
This river's right there. So concerns about leaks and stuff like that.
Right.
It's pretty good wetlands on it.
Okay.
That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or any cross-examination? Ms. Hutchins, anything? For him?
I really appreciate all the comments. Yours are very insightful and really helpful. I mean, it gives all of us such a better perspective of the impacts within the city. Just to clarify, I've been chatting with my construction foreman, hopefully discreetly and not interrupting. We don't do any venting at all within city limits. So I'm not sure what the reports of gas are, but there's definitely no vents, there's no leak, so I don't know. And there's no compressor on this site. And then we have no, this has never been an inactive site, so it's always been an active well. It's never been shut in or abandoned or anything like that. So those are just, that's just some feedback, additional detail I've been getting kind of in response to some of the concerns. I guess that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before we close testimony, I
Yes.
have one quick question for Ms. Hutchins about, because I know that there's a right-of-way, and like I'm looking at the fences and your fence, the well pad fence, they're just right up there. So is there encroachment on the right-of-way by, I mean, I'm not sure, and I know that that happens all over town. I know that that's happened. I'm not saying.
With the other houses coming up
The-
up to the well pad area?
I just know that there's a right-of-way, a certain amount of feet in right-of-way that you're supposed to leave clear for whatever.
Right, yeah, so not
So my-
every site has an actual right-of-way.
Okay.
Lots of these locations are drilled on lease. And like for the example, and the leases are pretty large areas typically. So here, probably the well pad and a lot of the houses and all the access is on one lease. And so under the oil and gas lease, you have rights to ingress and egress. And then you have a right to whatever size well pad is reasonably necessary for production and maintenance of the oil and gas well. And so what we've seen happen in city, and I don't know, I wasn't around working oil and gas when all this was going on, but we've seen lots of other sites like this where the sites kind of progressively get smaller and other things get built around them. I'm not sure what the discussions were that allowed that. It definitely wouldn't be anyone in this room's first preference. It's not the best situation. I don't know how it occurred. We don't have anything. I mean, we have the right to access whatever we need to get to that well. And so we've had other situations where we've had to temporarily remove like a landowner fence or a shed or something like that so that we could get a rig in to work the well. We don't need to do that on this one. We're able to position it, but that is something that happens. And when that happens, you know, the service owner has to adjust or let us use it temporarily, and then we'll put the fence back up or something like that. So it's something we see a lot. But I don't know what happened in the history to allow
I was
it.
just curious because I mean, it's obvious in the pictures, there's not a lot of room, so I was just curious about
And if we look
that.
back in historical pictures, I'm sure we'd see a lot more room around that well that just slowly got encroached on.
I didn't know if the well site, I mean, I know it's been there for a long time, and I know that, you know, and I don't know when that new subdivision was approved or, you know, whatever was in place at that time, but I noticed that, like the one gentleman said, you could
Yeah,
reach out and
it's really
touch.
tight. And with new drills, we have survey plats done by a registered surveyor that go into the well file that outline the full dimensions of the well. And for whatever reason, they just weren't doing that back then.
Okay, thank you.
So we don't have
So
any
it's-
records like that.
Okay, thank you. That's what- right away.
Okay, unless there's any further questions or conversation for any of the interested parties or the applicant, I'm going to close the hearing to testimony and move into our discussion phase with the City Commission. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or anything we can discuss? I do.
I feel a
but
strong
I'm happy
need to table it.
Well, we've had one landowner that wants to build the fence up,
Tall
and then
fence,
another
and
one
then
that says no, because it will block his view. So there's not even agreement, you know what I'm saying, and that's individual preference.
I'm not even worried about the
So,
landscaping
no,
and
I'm
the view
just-
shed.
I'm saying,
personally.
and
Well, I've
I
got
think
it
that
written
we
down
would
as-
like to, I would like to see the smell mitigated, of course, that they would continue to do that. The reality is that the well's not going to go away. It's going to continue, they're going to continue to produce whatever they can off of that. It's already a footprint that's there. Just, I'm just throwing out these things. I mean, they're going to continue to use it, so until it no longer produces at all.
But this
And so-
this recompletion
Will-
is going to
Will
prolong the
extend-
life of that.
It will, that's what I'm saying,
Right.
but it's not going to go away, is
No,
what
I
my
understand that.
point.
But will the new activities improve the efficiency so that the smell and the
That's-
release of whatever is controlled. I don't know that.
I don't know that either, and I don't live there, so I'm not the one that has to
And
live with
well,
whether it does or
It's all just
doesn't.
questions, it's all just
And-
food for thought.
And I appreciate that, and please don't, again, I'm trying to temper what I'm saying, but it's easy for me as a commissioner to sit up here and kind of ask these rhetorical questions, but I'm not the one that has that in my backyard and has my eyes burning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I have to get up and work the next day and try and also make a living and try and, live with something that when I moved into this property was not an issue, and now it's an issue and it's exponentially growing larger and larger. And this is the opportunity for these property owners to air their concerns and to try and maybe, end that cycle of continuous expansion. Because if you move into a place, I'm assuming, and someone up here can correct me if I'm wrong, and you're like, okay, well, this is not a problem right now, and then you find out later, and sure, you can say, well, shame on the homeowner for not doing more thorough research, but again, I guess I go back to the question is just because it's legal doesn't make it right. And I certainly would not want to be in a position to where intermittently, whether it's once a week, once a month, with, in my case, I have a 9-month-old grandson that is living with me, that would not be an acceptable answer to me. It just wouldn't. I'd be like, well, it might happen, but it might not. That's not good enough for me. And I would want to get some reassurances, and from what I understand from the testimony, there are no reassurances. They can't, they're actually kind of basically downplaying that is, Stephen said that he went out and smelled it today, or was it today or last week? I'm sorry, that's right, we've closed testimony. But so, since this application was submitted, he's visited the well site, so within the last couple of weeks, and we could look back if that's that important to anybody up here, and he smelled it. The homeowners are saying they smell it. So it's there. And the one gentleman said that he literally visually saw something,
Vapors.
whether it was gas or water that was contaminated, that was fuming, and where you can see it, spill out on multiple occasions. So much so that he's worried about, and maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just overcautiousness and it smells really bad, so you don't want to be the guy to figure it out that it was bad enough to blow your house up. And I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen, okay? But I know that when I walk out of my backyard at my house on Lover's Lane that I don't have any of those concerns. And I have a very hard time sitting up here and playing, decision maker when it comes to their concerns and kind of, just in a sense kind of pushing them off and saying that they're reasonable and that we should be able to live with that, because I wouldn't want somebody to tell me that. I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from.
But tabling this so we have some more time to think through these different issues that have been presented. And weren't you talking about something you needed to look up as far as legalities?
What I was bringing up was there was a lot of conversation going on about this being grandfathered in.
Right.
What I was saying is, according to the ordinance, I'm not seeing any language about this being grandfathered in. There is a statute that says that it must comply with, all ordinances. And if we have concerns about being grandfathered, I'd want to do legal research as to that, to see in these situations where, the site or the lease existed before the neighborhoods, are there, legal concerns that we need to have that aren't addressed in the ordinances? For me, it's not grandfathered in according to the ordinance. I'm not saying that there's not legal precedents out there. I just don't have access to it right now.
Right.
So we do have the option to table it to a specific time and date, if we think that any additional information will help.
I kind of just
I'm
feel-
willing to open that up and make that possibly, as an available or, temporary.
I just feel like I need some time to think about all this to get my head on straight from all this information and my concern about this being so close to this residential area, and write down some pros and cons of the whole situation.
I mean, honestly, I'll just, and I think you guys know where I stand on this one. I'm willing to table it, so, you know, I'm not going to jump up on the table and scream and shout about that, but I do not personally feel like we need to table it because I have the information, and I'm not, you know, I'm 1-1 right now. I'm not in favor of this because of the safety issues over being able to extract a little bit more gas out of this one well. It's not worth it to me. And I would not want, if I was sitting in that crowd, I would not want my commissioners to say it's an acceptable risk if I had children, or even if I didn't. I mean, I'm pretty happy, you know, getting up every day and walking around Aztec.
The other part is, if we look at it and put requirements on it, we can help the neighborhood, where if we reject it, we can't. Because this opportunity to add conditions or to do something is now with the approval of a permit. That's why, because otherwise you're saying live with it.
Right, and just deal with it until it runs its course. I
Yep.
understand, yeah.
And,
I mean, that's a great...
this is the time which we can make some conditions that may be helpful to that neighborhood.
Okay.
So that's my
That makes great
position, because otherwise you're saying, well, live with what you got.
Mr. Mayor, I also wouldn't mind having a little bit more legal
Give her some
background
opportunity to do some
to see
research.
if what precedents have been set in the past in similar situations. So making sure we're not cutting off our nose to spite our face
Right.
legally.
So I have been convinced. I think we should
Okay.
table it.
Okay.
So, thank you. I mean, hey, that's
we have to-
why we all have different backgrounds and different experiences, and that's the value of this, I think. So, I appreciate that, because sometimes we can dig our heels in. So, I do appreciate that. So, if that's where we think we are, I would entertain a motion to that end, please. Yes, ma'am.
Can you open up the meeting?
Yes, we have a request. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to testimony for Mr. Saavedra.
Procedurally, Commission has the opportunity to visit the site, then yourselves, okay?
Okay.
How that would work is it would be a quorum, we would advertise it, and it's going to be specific to this. If you were to visit that site, it has to be everyone there, everyone present.
Okay.
There can be no talking, no discussion at all. Not from staff to commission, and not from commission to commission. It has to be completely silent. It is just to observe, okay? That may be an option to get more information if you have concerns. And I'm sure we'll check to make sure all the legalities are okay, but that is an option that commission has if they feel that's a viable step to get a better understanding of this specific site.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Saavedra.
Do we need to
I'm going
specify?
to close the testimony again. So I'm going to close the hearing to any further testimony again. Thank you for the added input. And again, I guess we could take another opportunity if anybody has any further discussion to add. So if the plan is to table it, I would like to entertain a motion to that end.
And we have to pick a specific date to do that. So do we want to make it the next commission meeting, which would be
I'm comfortable with that. That would be
October 9th?
9th.
Would that give you enough time to, okay.
That would? Yes. Okay. Okay, so, Mr. Mayor, I'll attempt this. I'll attempt this motion. I move to table the decision on the oil and gas 18-04 until October the 9th. I can't do it like that? Oh,
They're going to need time for advertising.
okay, okay. So do we have to go to the 20,
The
then it'd be
23rd.
the 23rd? Okay. Mr. Mayor, once again.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Sykes.
I'm going to amend my motion. I would like to move to table the decision on the oil and gas 18-04 application until the October 23rd meeting so that we can gather more information and come to a better decision.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Carla, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Schmelter.
Aye.
Commissioner Syed.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fry.
Aye.
Commissioner Brooks.
Aye.
Motion passes 14.
All right. And we still have one more land use hearing under item D, OG 18-05, Hill Corp. Incorporated Drill Site Permit, Fay Burdette number 1, southwest northeast of Section 9. And there are no other folks besides the applicant signed up, so we can move forward a little bit quicker maybe. Mr. Saavedra.
OG 1805 is a request to modify the existing well as seen here. It's taken as of today. This is the site. It's within, well, it's actually within close proximity of our North Main development plan. As you know, that's a three-phase plan, existing right here on the corridor. First phase has already been completed as zero phase, bringing up the right of way out of floodplain. Access to this site occurs right here. It's actually fenced
Martinez
off.
Lane?
It's actually not Martinez
Okay.
Lane. It is Pioneer, I believe. It's not a dedicated street from right here. That's why we bring up right away.
Okay.
But it is fenced. There is a sign, and that's where access does occur. It is currently fenced off, as you can see in the photo. Staff again is recommending approval with conditions. This is where access does take place. Private drive, there's a sign right here. Hill Corp has already changed it. And then there's the gate. Again, this is not, there's been some gravel, but as you can see over time, it has dissipated. So we are requesting again that if this is the primary access point to the site, that gravel does be placed and maintained throughout its existence, a well with a concrete apron. It does extend into the street, which serves as somewhat of an apron, but you can tell when times get muddy, you'll find evidence of gravel and mud on the right of way. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Saavedra, you're saying that there needs to be a new apron put on that one? Is that what I understood?
So if you were to go visit the site, you would see that the street, there is some asphalt that extends it to that private
Oh,
driveway.
okay, asphalt, okay.
It is 2 feet, so it's not sufficient in terms of providing the necessary means to preventing the gravel into the street.
Okay.
Or the mud. There's not a lot of gravel right now.
Right,
so.
right.
Okay, Mr. Saavedra, you said it was in close proximity to the proposed area where we're hoping in the future to develop the North Main area, correct?
Yes, we are going to develop that plan.
Okay.
Hoping it's a good one.
Yes, sir.
So North Main right here, we already established the overlay district as well that put additional requirements in terms of uses. So again, as Ms. Hutchin has said in past applications, it's a property rights issue, and I take no doubts we are a big property rights state. To clarify that, though, we are in the city of Aztec, and zoning, overlay zoning districts and so forth does have requirements that we all have to abide by. So I think staff feels that the landscape, again, there's nothing different, there's nothing unique about this one. We're trying to be as consistent as possible. It's right here. It's in close proximity with North Main. As you can recall with North Main, it is a walkable corridor. We're trying to entice development of retail and restaurants. Basically what we want to do is economic development, but get people out towards the outdoor recreation initiative that we've been promoting, not just for the city, but the county as a whole. Pedestrian bridges are right there, walkway there, well here. It is within close proximity to North Main. This is part of the Chafee property, so Chafees have submitted preliminary plans in the past, and this is part of their preliminary plans. I mean, they own the property, but Health Corp owns the rights to the well. Hope that answers your question. Not really.
Well, I'm just, yeah, it does, because seeing where it's situated, as far as going forward with, landscaping, noise mitigation, dust mitigation, that's going to be kind of smack dab in the middle of where we are not hoping, but planning on developing.
Yes and no. If you were to go visit that site, you would, there is natural vegetation throughout the area. You could see some of the trees that do serve as a buffer. But if you are going to access this corridor, you will see it. Just like any other, if you're looking for it, you will see it. You can see that there's this arroyo. This is a flood zone right here. But there's also the trees, the cottonwoods right there, that serve as a buffer. So, from here, if somebody was to develop this, that we are hoping, this whole parcel is slated for development, you will see it. There is not a question, and there's not any doubt. So let me be very clear about that. If our plan is to develop North Main, this parcel is included in that development plan, you will see it.
Okay. Thank you. No, I